Something changed this year. Every developer I know is quietly asking the same question. Do the skills I spent years building still matter? It's a fair question. AI writes better code every month. The gap between junior and senior is closing, and the more you delegate, the more the output starts to look the same, generic and inconsistent. It's impressive for 5 minutes of glory on X, but becomes impossible to maintain by the third feature. But that's not the real story. AI doesn't make developers less valuable. It makes the gap between developers with a system and developers without one larger than it's ever been. Anyone can open up Claude and get code out. That's easy. What almost no one figures out is how to give the agent enough context, structure, and direction to build something that holds together, something you can ship, maintain, and trust. That's the actual skill. And it's completely learnable. This is JobPilot, a full-stack AI agent that finds jobs, scores each role against your profile, and then sends real browsers across the open web to research the company behind every listing. It writes your cover letter and tailors your resume to match. This application would have taken a team of developers at least a month to build. Now, I built it on my own in a couple of days without writing a single line by hand. And by the end of this video, you'll have built it too. Same stack, same way I did. If you know basic JavaScript, you can follow along. But the app isn't why you're here. You're here for this: 5 open source agent skills. Architect, remember, review, recover, and imprint. They'll give your agent memory, focus, and the ability to ship without drifting. You install them once and then use them on every project after today. They're free, open source, and completely yours after this video. You can get them from a GitHub repo down below. And I also took the time to write a full guide covering exactly how to use each one of these skills in more detail. I'll put it in the description too. Now, the stack. Next.js 16, InsForge for the backend, Browserbase and Stagehand for real browser automation, GPT-4o for intelligence, PostHog for analytics. By the end, you won't just have a working AI agent. You'll have a system for building anything. A system that doesn't get replaced by the next model, but instead gets stronger every time you use it. We're now at a time where one engineer with the right system has no ceiling on what gets shipped. So, let's build. Before we touch a single tool, give me 5 minutes to tell you about the part that decides whether your build ships or falls apart halfway through. There's no code in this section, yet it's the most important one in this entire video. Because this is the process of how I think before I write a single prompt. Without it, even the best model will drift. It'll start contradicting itself and just break your codebase. If you've felt that, you know what I mean. And if you haven't, first of all, you're crazy, great job, but you most likely will. The problem is that most developers using AI do the same thing. They open up the editor, describe what they want, the code appears, and they react to whatever comes out. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's broken. Fix it, move on, and repeat. That's great for demo apps, but that workflow has a ceiling, and most devs hit it fast. The problem is that AI has no idea of what you're building. It knows what you said in the last message, maybe a few messages back, but it doesn't know the decisions you made 3 days ago, what you decided not to build, your conventions, your folder structure, or where your project stands today. So it guesses, and those guesses compound. 3 weeks in, your database is full of contradictions that nobody can fully explain. So here's how to fix it. The first half of the fix is context. Not just telling the agent what to build, but giving it a complete picture of the system it's building inside of. For JobPilot, I wrote 9 context files before the agent touched the line. What the product is and who is it for. architecture, folder structure, code standards, UI rules, design tokens, library-specific patterns, a build plan, and a living progress tracker that updates as we go. 9 files, so that the agent never has to guess. It is some real time upfront, but you only have to write them once. And then these files travel with the project for its entire life. And if you keep watching, I'll show you how we can set them up together when we start the project. Now, the second half of the fix are agent skills. In my previous video, I used spec files, one spec per feature each build session. It worked, but it was pretty heavy, as every feature needed a new document. But this time, I improved that workflow. What you're watching today is the latest workflow I'm working with after years of improving it. This time, I replaced specs with something better. 5 agent skills, built from real production builds, real failures I've encountered, and real sessions where the agent drifted and I had to figure out why. Each skill came from a specific problem that I kept hitting until I refined the solution. And each one is just a command you run inside of your AI session. Here's what they do and what they prevent. First one on the list is architect, which you run before any complex feature. Without it, you start typing a prompt, the agent builds, and then halfway through, you realize you never decided how auth would work for this. Your agent just made a guess, and now you're refactoring. With it, when you run architect, it reads your context files, asks focused questions one at a time, surfaces the decisions you haven't made yet, and produces a plan. That's the conversation you should be having before every serious feature. And now, it happens automatically. The second skill is called remember. You use it at the end of every session. Without it, every new session starts from zero. You spend 10 minutes re-explaining what was decided yesterday. Or you don't, and the agent contradicts itself by lunch. With it, you run remember when you wrap up. It compresses what happened, decisions made, patterns established, progress completed, into a memory file. Then the next session loads it on open, which gives you continuity without re-explaining. Then there's review, which you run after a feature is built. Without it, the agent finishes a feature, 400 lines, you skim, you commit, and 3 days later, you find a bug. With it, you run review. It checks if the implementation matched the plan, if it respects your architecture boundaries, and if it's production ready. It then returns issues by severity, critical, important, minor, and it never auto-fixes things, so you stay in control. I also came up with recover for when things break. Without it, something's wrong. You're 4 hours into a session, you don't know if it's a targeted bug, a polluted context, or a wrong assumption from earlier. So the AI starts spiraling and you spiral too. With it, you run recover, it diagnoses which failure mode you're in and gives you the right corrected response. That's one prompt instead of a very frustrated afternoon. And finally, there's imprint, which I use after building any UIs. Because without it, 3 sessions in, your buttons all look different. Spacing is a tiny bit off, and your design system has mistakes that you didn't really notice. With it, when you run imprint, it captures the new components patterns into your UI registry. So you run it across the codebase, it finds the inconsistencies, and produces a fix list. That way, the design system stays coherent across every sessions. 5 skills. Handles every serious failure mode developers hit when building with AI agents. Drift, inconsistency, broken sessions, UI chaos, and lost memory. 1 skill for each one of them. It took a lot of trial and error and frustration to come up with them, but here they are, and they're open source. Not just locked to this project or this stack or this agent. You can install them once and use them anywhere. So I'll leave the link in the description. And to make it even easier, I've also put together a guide covering exactly how to use each skill in more detail, when to run them, and how to set up your own context files for any project you build. I'll put it in the description too. So here's the full loop. Start every project by writing context files, 9 documents that give the agent complete knowledge of what you're building. That's the foundation. And I just realized that I didn't go into too much depth about the 9 files in this crash course, but I did write more about them within the guide that I just mentioned, so you can check it out there. But these files are the foundation. Then you build feature by feature. Before any complex feature, run architect. After you implement it, run imprint if it's UI, review if it's complex, and at the end of the session, remember. And when something breaks, call recover. Context makes sure the agent knows your system. And the skills make sure that every session is focused, every feature is reviewed, and that nothing gets lost between conversations. That's the system. And it is simple on paper. But what matters is using it on a real project under real pressure. And that's what the rest of this video is for. Here, you just heard about some new skills and new concepts that you might end up using. But if you continue watching until the end, I'll show you how you can actually use them to build JobPilot. Every feature, every session, same workflow, and to also be able to use them across all of your future projects. And if you want to go deeper, the Agentic Dev course teaches all of this from the ground up. The fundamentals, the architecture thinking, and the patterns that made me come up with these 5 skills in the first place. So within the course, I'll take these skills apart and show you how you can make yours. Those are the patterns that make AI work on serious projects. So I'll leave the waitlist link in the description so you can know when the course is out. So now that you understand the workflow, let's learn it and practice it in action. Time to build. That's the system. And the product you build with it is almost beside the point. If you swap JobPilot for anything else, the workflow won't change. But you still need a stack to build on. So here's what we are using for this build and why each piece earns its spot in an app like this. For the entire backend, we'll use InsForge. JobPilot needs 3 things on day 1: auth, a database, and file storage. Almost every single app needs this. Google and GitHub login, tables for profiles and jobs, and a bucket to hold resume PDFs. InsForge gives you all of this in one platform. And the part that matters for this is the MCP server, because your agent connects straight to your backend, reads the live schema, and wires things all on its own, instead of guessing against an API it half remembers. And the free tier covers everything that we built today. So while we're here, let's immediately create an account, click the InsForge link down in the description, sign up, and you'll be redirected to your dashboard, so that later on, we can immediately start using it. For browser automation, you'll use Browserbase, along with their AI browser SDK, Stagehand. A big chunk of JobPilot runs in a real browser, reading any job URL you paste in, and sending an agent across the web to research a company before you apply. You don't want that running on a headless browser on your own machine, because it crashes and some companies can detect it as a bot. Browserbase instead gives you a real managed browser in the cloud with session recording and a live view you can drop straight into the app so users watch the agent work. Stagehand sits on top of that and lets the agent read and pull data from any page in plain language instead of using the brittle CSS selectors. Once again, it's free to start and everything we'll do will fall under that free plan. Click the special link down in the description so you can follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing later on when we set it up. For now, just creating an account is enough. And for analytics, you'll use PostHog. Once people are searching, researching companies, and tailoring resumes, you want to see what's actually happening, which actions get used, what lands, and where people drop off. PostHog rolls analytics, session replays, and feature flags into one tool, and it's super quick to wire up thanks to their PostHog wizard. It'll power your full analytics and help you use this new workflow that I'm teaching in this video with so much more potential because you'll make educated decisions on what you want to build, now that you can actually build super fast, allowing you to build the features that your users actually want. Once again, their free tier is super generous, and I'll leave the link down in the description so you can create an account, and later on, we can just one-click install it with a wizard. So if you haven't, pause the video and create accounts, as we'll be using them within the first couple of lessons. If you've done that, perfect. Now we are ready to build JobPilot feature by feature while following this workflow that I taught you in the crash course, but that we'll now together explore throughout the full build. So let's go. Okay, I hope you're ready to get started developing our application in this new agentic workflow that I want to teach you. We'll start straight from the beginning by creating a new empty folder on our desktop, and you can go ahead and call it something like JobPilot, which is going to be the name of our application. And then simply drag and drop it into your VS Code or Cursor or any other text editor or IDE that you use nowadays. I mean, even the concept of what a text editor is changing nowadays. Cursor and Codex for some time have been using this view where on the left side, you have a list of conversations you have with your agents. In the middle, you have the actual conversation contents. And then on the right, you can have either code or a preview of the browser. Recently, VS Code came up with that option as well. You just need to search for the agents window or click the button on the top right, and it'll open up something that looks like this, where no longer you have the files on the left side and then the code in the middle, and that's it, where you have a list of sessions on the left side and then the actual conversation in the middle. Love it or hate it, what it means to be a developer or an engineer is changing. And that's exactly the goal of this video, to guide you through that transition smoothly and to help you stay on top of it. So now that we have an empty project, go ahead and open up your integrated terminal. While that still exists, jokes aside, I think there's always going to be place for a terminal, and create a new Next.js application. You can do that by running npx, create next app, add latest, and then just dot to create it within the current directory. It'll ask you whether you want to install the create next app installer, so just go ahead and say why, yes. And it'll ask you some questions, such as would you like to use the Next.js defaults? In this case, we're going to proceed with that, as it's going to turn on TypeScript, ESLint, no React compiler, Tailwind CSS, no source directory, app router, and the default agents.md file. So let's go with the recommended options. Give it a minute to set everything up. Once that's done, you can of course go ahead and run npm run dev to spin up the project on localhost 3000 and then open it up within your browser. This is new. I command clicked it, expecting that it's going to open it up in my default browser, like it used to do for years, but instead, it actually opened up the app as a tab in my VS Code window. This is pretty cool. It's an integrated browser within which localhost links automatically open up. Pretty cool. You can use it just as a regular browser, or you can also turn on the inspect element, so you can select specific elements, and then it automatically puts them within your agentic chat session. I love this. So far, you had to use a third-party app or a browser extension in order to be able to do that, but now it's integrated directly within your VS Code. This is amazing. So it knows that this is referring to your app, that is referring to an H1, and it even passes a screenshot to the part that you're trying to fix. So now you can just say, modify this, and it'll immediately do it. Love it. We'll definitely use this later on. You can also add element to chat, add screenshot to chat, or add console logs to chat. Pretty cool stuff. And there's a full browser console and elements tab right here. Love it. Now let's go ahead and modify some of the default files right here by heading over into the app and then page. We can clean this page up by just running rafc. If that isn't working for you, you can head over to extensions and install React snippets. There's a couple of different packages. There's the simple React snippets that I have right now, within which you can simply say SFC to create a stateless functional component. But there's also this ES7 React Redux React Native snippets that allows you to use the rafce keyword. So you can either use that, or you can use the SFC from the other one. Either way works for me. Let's call this page home. And then within the home, we can simply return an H1 that says job JobPilot. And I think I'm zoomed in a bit too much, so I'll zoom out a bit and you can hopefully still see everything on the screen. Now, let's head over into the globals.css where we have the default styling right now. We want to remove all of that default styling, but just keep the import to Tailwind CSS so we can use all of its utilities. Later on, we will fill in this root as well as the theme inline, as well as some media where it prefers the color scheme set to dark, so we can specify the dark mode of our application, where we'll be able to modify some root classes. And then, of course, there is the body in case we want to do some resets. Later on, I'll provide you with the styling so that we can focus on what matters, and that is learning about this agentic workflow. Let's also head over into our public and remove everything from it. The only thing we'll keep is the empty public folder, because later on we'll fill it in with additional assets. So now that we have an empty slate of our application, like it's completely empty, there's nothing there, we want to set up our agentic skills and context files that we'll use in all of the upcoming lessons of this video, but also in every upcoming project that you work on. To start setting up our agentic workflow, we'll need some context files. And just so you don't have to create one by hand, down in the description, I'll leave a video kit link, which is going to look something like this. Here you have different useful links, such as the link to the open source code base of this project, the deployment, the assets, and some guides, Discord channels, and so on. And on the right side, you have some snippets that I'll refer to throughout this video. So I've put all of that neatly in one place so that you can refer to it as we go through the build. Let's start off with the assets part. So click on this. It'll lead you to this Google Drive where you can download the public folder zip as well as the context zip. Once you get them, you can unzip them, remove this public folder, and then simply drag and drop both of these folders right here at the root of your application. And you can say copy folders. Public is going to be simple. Here we have our JobPilot logo, as well as the images we'll be using later on for our agents, dashboard, and so on. And then the context is where the magic happens. But before I go through each one of these individually and explain them, in this video, I'll teach you how to take your agentic development workflow even further by using custom skills. I've been writing code using AI for many years now, but especially throughout the last 6 to 12 months, I doubled down on it ever since Claude Opus 4.6 came out, and since then, I've been improving my workflows. But I didn't feel like rewriting all my rules for every single project. So, skills made a lot of sense. I created a series of skills that combine all of my workflows and learnings and struggles of years of working with agents into a set of skills that you can install into any project. And installing them is super simple. You just have to run npx skills add latest, add JavaScript Mastery Pro skills, or you can install them individually. Below, you can find some info on each one of these skills, but don't worry, as that's exactly the point of this video, to teach you how to use these skills. If you want to know how I created these skills in the first place, how I came up with the ideas, and why I thought these specific workflows need to be turned into skills, you'll likely be interested in the agentic development course that I'm working on. That's going to be a collection of all of my learnings over the years of trying to tell AI to write code. Now it actually can, and I'm ready to compile it into a single course. So for now, you can only join the waitlist, but it's going to be out soon. Now, with that in mind, you can head back over into our terminal and you can open up a second window, and within it, run npx skills, add latest, add JavaScript Mastery Pro skills. It'll ask you whether you want to install the skills installer, so you can say Y, proceed, and then it'll ask you which skills you want to install. In this case, you can select all of them. There's just 5. It'll ask you for which agents you want to install those skills. You can select the one you're using. You have a lot of options right here. We can use Claude Code, or we can use something like Codex or Gemini. That's going to be completely up to you. Of course, there's also Cursor, but you can see for it, that's universal and it works right out of the box. So press enter, install it either on the project or globally through Symlink, and proceed with installation. Now, after you install it, if you would be so kind, you can also give this repo a star. So as more of us use these skills, we'll get more issues and pull requests to improve them even further and make them better. Once installed, you'll see these skills appear directly within your project, right within agents, and here they are. In the crash course, you already learned about when and how we'll be using these skills, and very soon we'll start putting that to practice. Now, before we start using our context files, which are going to work together with our skills, I want you to think about something. Imagine you're a developer and a client comes to you and says, build me a website with no brief, no requirements, no design, just that. What do? I mean, you make guesses, right? Assumptions. You build something that made sense to you, but not necessarily what they wanted. That's exactly what happens when you open up a chat window, like I do right here, and then you tell it something like, build me a SaaS app. The model, whichever one you're using nowadays, isn't stupid. It just has no idea what you actually want. So it fills the gaps with its best guesses. And 3 sessions in, those guesses compound into something that, well, nobody asked for. So before we write a single prompt, we want to give our agent everything it needs to know. And that's coming in form of these 9 files, each one of which gives the agent a specific layer of knowledge that it would otherwise have to guess. It starts with the big picture, which is the project overview. Here, we tell the agent what JobPilot or whatever project you're working on, actually, it's a full stack AI-powered job hunting assistant. The user sets up their profile once, uploads their resume, and the agent automatically discovers relevant jobs from LinkedIn, scoring each one against the user's profile using GPT-4o, or later on we can switch this. So we tell it what it is and what problem it solves. And we tell it about the problem it solves. Job hunting is one of the most repetitive and time-consuming tasks a developer faces. So the goal here is to eliminate all of that. Now, why are we telling it that? Well, the more context it has, the better decisions it'll be able to make with the limited context that we give it through the prompts. Then we also give it every single page and the full user flow, how the user moves from page to page, and exactly what happens. We also give it some more information about the specific functionalities of the app, which in this case is finding actual jobs, and provide more info. Then, a bit below, we talk about what's in scope, but also at the same time, and this is important, what's out of scope for this application. The agent reads this file once and knows exactly what we're building, and more importantly, what we're not. That way, there's no scope creep. It's simple for it to understand our success criteria. So once it knows what we're building, it also needs to know how it's built. And for that, there's another context file called architecture.md. You can also open it up in Markdown. It's going to look something like this. And this file is all about the stack, as well as the folder structure of the application, the system boundaries and data flow, as well as database schemas, and a set of rules that our AI agent must never violate. For example, API routes contain no UI logic. Components contain no DB logic. Agent code in agent never imports from components or actions. Server actions never call agents, and you get the idea. That's the architecture. That was the architecture. But now it needs to know what to build and in what order. And that's what the build plan is for. Within the build plan, we tell it how we want to split this build into phases. For example, we're going to have 25 total features across 5 phases, with every feature being defined, scoped, and sequenced correctly. So that way, the agent never has to decide what comes next because it already knows it. This is the roadmap that we follow for the entire build. And if you're wondering, but hey, how do I actually come up with all of this? Or do I have to prompt my AI agent to create this before we even begin? The answer is yes. That's something that we'll dive much deeper within in the agentic development course. But yeah, through the conversation with AI, before you even begin with the build, you come up with these rules and different things that you want to build. It can easily split it into different features one by one for you, and then that's the plan that we can follow. Of course, we can choose to deviate from it, but more or less we're going to stick with it. So once we know what to build, then it needs to know how to write the code. And that's what the code standards file is for. Here, we tell it a bit about the TypeScript rules, for example, the naming conventions or Next.js 16 conventions, the file and folder naming, the component structure, how we handle specific errors or server actions. Basically, every single convention that you follow, that you can think of, write it down once. And this is what keeps the agent consistent across every session instead of simply drifting away into its own style by week 2. And it also needs to know how to use the tools. So for that, we have the library docs.md. This file is not just generic documentation. It's on exactly how we use each library in a specific project, like JobPilot in this case. So before using any library, check if an MCP server is configured for that library, read that file, and only then act. In this case, we'll be using InsForge, so we tell it how we can use it and some rules that it can follow. Same thing for auth, DB queries, and Browserbase, which we'll be using later on to actually scrape the data. Check for the MCP of this library that we want to use, and some examples of how we can use it. Of course, I was super detailed right here, but these context files are something that you can build along the way as you're building the application. But of course, the more you prepare at the start, the better. Now, for the UI layer, there's 3 files, each handling a different part. Let's start with UI tokens. Here, we define every single color, spacing value, border radius, or typography scale, and we pull it directly from the design, defined as CSS variables. The agent will use these exact values with no hard-coded hex values or no inconsistency between the pages. So once it knows the primitives, we can head over into the UI rules.md. Here, we tell it how the UI behaves, things like the font, the layout, and how cards should look like. The button styles too, the badges, and everything. And this is what keeps every page feeling like it belongs to the same product. You know that if you're building with AI, very often the AI will start deviating from the general design. But with this in place, you can essentially consider it your entire design system. Write the visual rules here once, and then the agent will follow them across every page. And if you already have a Figma design, you can use a Figma MCP or just feed it over into AI, and it'll generate this for you. Finally, there's the UI registry. This is a living document, so we're essentially starting it empty. Later on, I'll teach you how to use the imprint skill, which fills it automatically as we build components. So as soon as you create some of the components, it'll check if a similar component exists. If yes, it'll match its exact classes. If no, it'll build it following the UI rules and UI tokens, and then add it here. This is super powerful if you're building without a design, and it's what keeps your components consistent across the entire codebase. There's also another file called progress tracker, which also begins kinda empty. None of the checkboxes have been checked, but it'll be automatically updated after we complete every new feature. So at the start of any new session, the agent knows exactly where we left off with no re-explaining needed. That's it. These are the 9 files that give the agent the full picture of what we're building, how the system works, what to build next, how to write the code, how to use the tools, and how the UI should look and behave. In this case, I was super detailed. When you're building these for your projects, you can start slow and then keep adding things as you go. And you'll most likely keep adding things as you switch it from a project to another project because you'll figure out what works and you'll want to stick with it, but then modify it just slightly to suit that new project. In this case, I took the time and I made it very detailed for 2 reasons. First of all, you can browse these files and try to understand the process that I follow while writing them. Again, within the agentic development course, I'll give you the full uncut version of me actually generating these files with AI. And the second reason is that since we're building this application together, I want both of our agents to give us more or less the same output. The less specific you are, the less similar and less perfect output you're going to get. But with this detailed context files, we should be getting almost the same output so that you can easily follow along until the end of this course. So how do we tie all of this together? Well, it has to do with the agents.md file, which right now is completely empty. If you head back over to your video kit, you'll see a final agents.md file right here, which you can copy and simply paste it right here. It's simple. It just ties everything together. Here, we're speaking directly to the agent. We tell it to read in this exact order before any implementation. Read all of these 9 files. And if you think that making it read these files is going to consume a lot of tokens, trust me, it's going to consume significantly less tokens than it would take it to generate some stuff that you'll end up scrapping and never using and going back and forth and fixing it. This workflow is made for the highest speed of development, but also the lowest token cost. Trust me on that, and you'll see for yourself as you continue following along. There's also some rules that never change, like no hard-coded hex values, update the progress tracker after every feature, load the skill before touching any third-party libraries, and it lists all the skills and exactly when to use them. Think of it like this. The context files are the knowledge, and the agents.md file is the instruction manual that tells the agent how to use that knowledge. Without it, the agent might skip a file, read them in the wrong order, or miss a rule. With it, every session starts exactly the same way: consistent, focused, and fully loaded. If you're using Claude, you'll need a claude.md file, which in this case should automatically point to the agents.md file. So this should be good no matter which agent you're using. You'll also notice that under context, there's this designs folder. This is to make sure that every page has a visual reference, so that when the agent builds UI, it's not inventing. It's simply trying to match what's already there. That's how you get consistent and polished UI without correcting it every session. And if you're finding all of this overwhelming, just follow along with this video, build it with me, and I think you're going to get a pretty good idea of how you can use this workflow for your own projects. Of course, if you want to dive deeper and learn how to create these files from scratch, you can join the waitlist for the full agentic course. But while that's not out, I actually already prepared the full AI development starter kit, including these context files, workflows, and the skills that we talked about, all within a single reference book that you can always go back to and look at when you're crafting these for your own projects. So now that the context is ready and our agents.md file is here, we're officially ready to start developing our application. Now, just before we run our first prompt, I want to tell you about the workflow that we'll be using. So no matter which agent you go with, the interface is more or less the same. You can open it up by pressing Command-Shift-P and then search for chat. At least that's how it's called in VS Code. Here, you'll see that you have the regular chat belonging to VS Code, Microsoft, and Copilot. There's also Claude Code and Codex. And these right here are just extensions. So if you head over to extensions and search for Codex, you can see it right here. It has almost 10 million downloads. And as soon as you install it, it'll appear right here. Same situation is happening with Claude or any other agent you decide to use. You install them and they appear right here. So this video is completely agnostic when it comes to the tool you're using. The thinking and the specs are what actually matters. The tool is your call. That said, here's what I'd recommend. Claude Code is amazing, and you can totally use it on the Sonnet model, which is cost-effective, and that's what I've done for the past 2 videos. In this one, I'll be using Codex. Lately, I was able to achieve a lot with very little token spent, and that's what most people are running these days. It's also the most budget option available, as they have the Go plan for only about $8 per month, a Plus plan, and they're usually giving away a month for free, depending on your region. In my case, I'll go with Plus. Either way, I'll make sure you don't burn through a ton of tokens regardless of what you pick. And sure, you can also use a Codex app or Cursor or whatever you want, or this agent window in VS Code. Everything works. The context and the workflow that we're going to go through and use together throughout this video is agnostic to whichever tools you or your team are using. So go ahead and open up your agent of choice. You can do that by pressing Command-Shift-I, which automatically opens up the chat window, and you can just select the agent you want to use. So let's start with setting up our design foundation. Everything we defined within UI tokens, we also need to put within our globals.css before the agent touches a single component. We want to do this first, and then every page we build after will be consistent from the start. If you skip it, the agent will just start guessing. So open up Codex or your agent of choice. Moving forward, when I say Codex, you can think of that as your own agent. And let's tell it something like this. Read the agents.md file and follow the reading order specified. Confirm once you've read all context files and are ready to build. With this prompt, the agent will read everything, confirm it's loaded, and then we build. So let's run it once to see what it has to say. And here, you'll also be able to watch it do its things, like read the agent's MD, and then finally moving through the files that we gave it. UI token, UI rules, UI registry, and so on. Now, we want to make sure that the agent uses Tailwind CSS v4, not v3. And for these types of situations, there's a package called Context7, which has up-to-date docs for LLMs and AI code editors. For example, the Next.js docs was changed 54 minutes ago, BetterAuth 20 hours ago, and here's Tailwind CSS changed 20 hours ago. You want to click on it, and then we want to give this info over to our agent so that it has the latest data available. We can do that right here within our terminal by running npx ctx7 context7 skills search Tailwind CSS. It'll ask us whether you want to install the context. And then you can select some of the skills. There's going to be many, but you can go with Tailwind CSS, Tailwind CSS patterns, Tailwind CSS utility components, I think is going to be another one that we want to use. Yep, utility classes right here. And finally, the best practices. So that's going to look something like this. And then press enter. You can install them right here. And now the agent will have both our project tokens and up-to-date Tailwind CSS v4 knowledge, which means that we are ready to write the globals.css prompt. In this case, we don't have to use the architect skill because there's no logic. It's just straightforward setup. So I'll tell it to read the UI tokens.md file and use Tailwind installed skills to check the correct Tailwind v4 setup and then set up the globals.css file. This fairly detailed context and skill setup allows us to write very short and quick prompts. So you'll see now that the setup is done, how we can very quickly progress through the application, given that the right context has already been put into place. Give it some time to think about it. And you might want to pause this video for a couple of minutes until the agent does this on your end. For me, it took about 3 minutes. It first checked the Tailwind skills, verified the Next.js docs, and only once it understood which technologies it's working with, it made sure that the CSS matches the token specification cleanly. Then it made sure that the build is running, that the fonts are being set up properly, and that's it. It set up Tailwind v4 globals in app.globals using the token pattern from the context UI tokens, a full theme, and it also aligned the layout with the project font rule by switching it to Inter. Great. So now if you want to check out the app.globals.css, it's going to look something like this. We get all of these new styles that now we can use within our application. So back within the homepage, if you head over here and give it a class name of something like, let's head over into our globals to see which fonts can we use. There's going to be the font text color info dark, for example. So you can give it a class name of something like BG info dark and also text dash white, as well as text dash 3XL. And then if you head back, you can see that all of these styles got applied. This means that our globals.css had been set up properly, at least for the initial primitive colors that we can use across our application to have consistent styling. So now that the globals file has been set up, immediately in the next lesson, let's build the homepage. Now that our design tokens are in place, we're ready to build the first page. And this is where everything we set up starts to pay off. Since we're going to start a new session, so you can head over into Codex and exit the current session, we want to start a new context for every new feature we're building. Start with a new chat, and whenever you do so, I always like to tell it to read the agents.md file and follow the specified reading order, and then confirm once it's actually read out. You can think of this as a pre-step that I always like to do before I start working on more complex features. And then while it's doing its thing, we can already start prompting it to build a feature. So I'll tell it to build the complete homepage exactly as shown in, and then here we can utilize our design images under context, landing page.png. I want to provide it with an image of the design that you can either find online or design it using Figma or some other design tools. So as shown in, and this is going to be the landing page.png file, and want to say use images from the public folder when needed, and run it. Just at the right time when it finished reading the agents.md file and all the other context files. And notice just how short that prompt is. No stack explanation, no folder structure, no UI rules, because the agent already has all of that from the context files. We just tell it what to build and where the visual reference is. That's it. And this is where the magic happens. Codex immediately started treating this as phase 1, feature 01 homepage, so it's loading the relevant build skills, the current homepage layout files, the Next.js local docs, and available assets so we can match the design cleanly before touching the code. The app is still very small, which is good for matching the design precisely. It got the design loaded. It's going to also take a look at some images. It dissected it, and it's loading the front-end design guidance. It's using the architect skill for the homepage structure and the imprint after implementation so we can keep this first feature deliberate and consistent with the project rules. And all of this is happening from a single short prompt that we gave it. We're building a fully designed marketing homepage that matches the landing page design with a top navbar, hero, and everything else. The language that it's locking in, exactly as shown, use images from public, complete homepage. Decisions that it's making, it made a decision to split the code into components, to stay within the existing project token system, and to make sure that it works on desktop, but also mobile. It made some assumptions, which is good, and then it created a step-by-step list of how it can start doing it. Finally, after all of that, it's moving into implementation, and it'll keep the component shapes close to the architecture docs. Now it's editing, creating one component after another. The homepage structure is done, and then it'll even lint it to check for any TypeScript or app router issues before it does the required registry or progress updates and the visual cleanup. There we go. Lint is clean. It's going to do another compile level check to catch any server errors or next images issues by running npm run build. Looks like the production build failed, which is amazing that we ran it, so we're able to notice this issue. And that's because Next Font couldn't reach Google Fonts from the sandbox, so it's going to rerun that build with network approval so we can verify the homepage compiles end to end. The build is passing. It's doing the final repo required bookkeeping next, such as marking the phase 1 feature homepage 01 complete in the tracker and imprinting that homepage patterns into the UI registry so future pages stay visually consistent. It's updating the 2 live docs right now, both the feature completion and the exact homepage class patterns we established. This is great. And I think even at this point, while we haven't yet checked out the output, you can see why that initial grunt work that we needed to do to set everything up is paying off significantly. While it's finishing, you can review the modified files, starting from the globals, where it added some new component-specific styles, to the layout, where it updated the title and the description, which is amazing. We didn't even ask it to do that, but it did it. Here is the homepage, and check just how clean that is. There's a navbar, there's a hero, there's a how it works, there's the features, success stories, call to action session. exactly as I would have coded it. So to people who say that the AI generated code isn't clean and readable and scalable, simply share them this part of the video. So after the homepage, there are the individual components, like the call to action section, which is also super clean, the features section, where it even extracted the data before the actual output, the hero section, how it works, success stories, footer, logo, all of these are just some representational components. And on top of changing these, it also updated the progress tracker.md, so we can go ahead and preview it. It simply marked the homepage as complete, as well as the UI registry, where now it added some new files like the landing footer, so that if it needs to be reused later on, it knows exactly how a footer should look like within our application, or maybe a call to action banner, or maybe a testimonial section. All of these are likely to appear on other pages. And now, believe it or not, our agent documented these features for us. And thanks to the context system we have put in place, it'll simply refer to this UI registry whenever it needs to do something similar in the future. So I guess this is the moment of truth. We have to run our application and see how does this homepage look like. I'll open it up right here in the preview, zoom it to a proper size, and check this out. Besides these buttons, which are fully dark, which we're gonna fix, and I'm super happy that there's something this obviously wrong. We're gonna fix it, don't worry. Take a look at the rest of the application. I mean, you can hover over these buttons and they move. The hero section and the font size and colors are done incredibly well. The subheading as well. It used this image from the assets and displayed it nicely. There's a second section right here, manage your job search with ease. Another section, apply with more confidence, where it used another image. A full page success stories using Tom Wilson and its image from the public folder, as well as a little ending part and then the footer. It did about a 99% match on the first try, with no back and forth, no corrections, and no re-explaining the design system. The context files did the work up front, so we don't have to do it here. But I definitely want to fix the buttons. And thanks to our design system, we only have to fix it once. This is actually a situation where I'm going to use this new VS Code add element to chat feature, where I'm going to select a button and add a corrective prompt, saying that all the buttons on the screen right now appear fully black, black background, and dark text, which is not visible on the dark background. Make them match the actual design and update it within the registry and the globals. So all the buttons on the screen look great. And you can see that now we're passing it all the info and the screenshot. In the screenshot, I can actually see the text right here, which is too dark. But as I said, the contrast just isn't good, so we have to fix it. It's gonna trace where button colors and tokens are defined, collect all the project rules, confirm the token intent for the button, and all of this is happening super quickly right now. It's basically doing it in real time as I'm speaking. It identified the button class usage. It found a conflicting token definitions in the repo. So it's gonna inspect it further by allowing it access to the browser. It'll now take a look at the application and see why it hasn't been done properly. It pinpointed the root cause. The text accent foreground utility is not taking effect on those dark CTAs, so they inherit dark text. It'll simply fix the globals.css, which is now super simple, modify it across all the buttons, and update the UI registry so that mistake doesn't happen again. But after some time, it found that the approach wasn't being emitted into compiled CSS properly, so it tried switching back to a more reliable approach, but then at the end of the day, just brought it back to dark buttons. And it told me that Copilot has been working for a while and that it can continue to iterate, but maybe we need to refine the prompt. And then I figured that in this case, it did it using Copilot because when we added this inspect element, it only works with VS Code's native chat application. But instead, we can copy this prompt and paste it as a corrective prompt directly into the Codex agent or whichever agent you used, because this one already has all the info from our context. And it should be able to fix it without necessarily pointing to it. It knows what the buttons are. So this was actually a good experiment. Let's see how much more powerful this agent is, considering that it has the context from before when we gave it the task to actually create this landing page. Oh wait, it actually did it super quickly. It found that the homepage was styling CTAs ad hoc, and it replaced that with the landing button primary and landing button secondary classes in globals, updated it, and now it looks great on the navbar as well as on the hero section and everywhere else where the buttons are being used. I think that's right here in the footer. So you can see that one corrective prompt, even without pointing to it with our finger, was able to immediately make a huge difference to our landing page. And that's it. The homepage is now done. The only thing that you need to do if you want to stay consistent with my workflow is to save the session before we move on. So open up your chat and simply run /remember. What this does is it'll save only the most important parts of the session so that the agent can refer to them later on. For example, about the buttons not being correct. And how can you know exactly what got saved? Well, it's simple. You can just head over into the memory.md file, which it now created. If we preview it in Markdown, you can see right here that the current state is that the homepage is fully implemented and matches the design, and it knows that the next session should start with the second feature of the phase 1, which is the authentication. Perfect. So in the next lesson, let's implement the auth. Now, just before we start adding authentication to our project, let me introduce you to the tool that's going to be powering the entire backend of this project, including the auth. It's called InsForge. And if you haven't heard of it, pay attention because it changes how you build backends with AI. InsForge gives your agent a complete backend in one platform. That includes authentication, database, storage, edge functions, model gateways, real-time functionalities, and vector search and embeddings. And all of it working directly with your coding agents, which makes it the perfect fit for this video and the workflow that I want to teach you. It's not retrofitted for AI workflows, but rather built for them from the ground up. What that means in practice is instead of your agent guessing how to wire up authentication, for example, or writing database queries against an API that it half knows, InsForge ships with an MCP server. Your agent then connects directly to your backend, reads live schemas, manages tables, and configures authentication based on all of these tools and knowledge that it has. That's the difference between a copilot and an agent that actually builds things for you from the ground up. And for our JobPilot project, InsForge is going to handle everything behind the scenes, including the auth, the entire database, resume storage, and all of it. It's a single platform, one connection, and no configuration that we have to manage ourselves. To start hooking it up, open up your agents, start a new chat, and run the remember command. This is the first time we're using it. Specifically, we want to say restore what it remembered before. This is only going to pull up the most important history so that it can use that data to do better work in the future. Now, before we go ahead and set up InsForge, go ahead and copy your entire agents.md file as it is and save it somewhere safe. That's because when InsForge installs, it writes its own instructions into agents.md, and sometimes it may overwrite your custom content. And we need that content back after the setup. So make sure to copy everything that is in here. Then head back over to InsForge. I'll leave the link down in the description that you can click on to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing and start building today. You can log in through either GitHub or Google. And when you're in, you can create a project. You can start with JSM_ and then call it something like JobPilot or maybe your own name and choose the region that is closest to you. Once you create it, it's going to load the interface. And you can either install it through the CLI or you can install it in agent mode. You can proceed with the CLI or select any of the agents here. I'll go ahead and click install on the Codex part since that's what we're using. It'll give you the option of the CLI, so you can simply copy and paste this, or an MCP, which is what I want to teach you how to implement. Simply copy the installation prompt, open up a new Codex chat, and simply paste what you copied. I'm using InsForge as my backend platform, please run this command to install the InsForge MCP server. And I believe for this, the medium reasoning model is going to be fine, and I'll be using GPT 5.5. This should do the trick. It'll now install the InsForge MCP server with the exact command we provided. Now, it said that the install command failed in Sandbox because network access to NPM is blocked, so we can either run it manually or we can approve the permissions. So I'll say approve, and it'll try it once again with these added permissions. Either way is totally fine. The next step is to restart the coding agent to check whether it has been installed properly. So to verify the connection, we can simply start a new session and tell it something like, I'm using InsForge as my backend platform. Call InsForge MCP's fetch docs to learn about InsForge instructions. And now we can see whether it'll actually call the InsForge MCP and confirm the connection. You can see that right here, fetch docs, there we go, and it has the full info. Now open up the agents.md file. You can see that InsForge added its own contents into the agents.md file. Thankfully, I told you to copy your previous agents.md so that we can still bring it back. So right on top of the InsForge SDK documentation, you can bring back what was previously within your agents.md. These instructions are important because they tell the agent how to use the backend. Your custom instructions tell it how to build this specific project, but both need to be here. Neither replaces one another. So now with InsForge set up, we are ready to implement authentication. Go ahead and open up your agent by heading over to Codex, and within a new chat, we can tell it something like check the progress tracker and also the build plan, right? Because there we listed everything we want to do. Then use the InsForge MCP to fetch the latest InsForge Auth documentation before we start implementing Auth. So again, you'll see me ask it to pull all the data together before it starts implementing things so that we know it's going to do it in the proper way. It'll read the progress tracker to figure out where we are right now in the process of developing the project. Then it'll check out the build plan to know what it needs to build next, and finally fetch the InsForge Auth docs via the MCP. So notice what's happening here. The agent is checking where we are in the build, what the auth requires, and then pulling live InsForge documentation through an MCP, not some outdated data. So now it's going to confirm the build plan. The next feature is auth, covering UI, Google, GitHub OAuth, callback handling, and so on. It has the latest InsForge docs, and the only thing you have to do now is to say something like start or go ahead. Given all the context we have, that's enough to spin it up and give it the permission to start developing the feature 02, in this case, auth. Since this one touches routing, middleware, client-server boundaries, and the login UI, it's going to use the architect skill to form the blueprint. It knows that it has to be a custom InsForge OAuth flow, and it pulled the latest Next.js 16 docs, where it noticed that middleware was replaced with proxy. Since most of the codebase online has been written with older versions of Next.js, if we didn't have these very detailed instructions on pulling the latest docs and using them, it is highly likely that the agent would have used the older version of the middleware and placed it at the wrong spot, therefore breaking the app. But since we have all of this setup done, it did it properly. So let's give it some time and see the implementation. Feel free to pause the video, as this actually took 8 minutes for me on medium reasoning. But yeah, after 8 minutes or so, it implemented the full auth feature. Includes the InsForge SDK auth setup, the OAuth start routes with Google and GitHub, server routes for OAuth callback exchange, refresh and logout routes, Next.js 16 route protection via proxy. So definitely make sure that you have a proxy right here in the root of the application and not a middleware file, because this changed in Next.js version 16 and our agent caught it. Added login UI, which we'll check out soon, minimal protected placeholders, and it updated the progress tracker and UI registry. We also have to add the .env file to our application because currently it doesn't exist. And in there, we have to add the next public InsForge URL and InsForge anon key. So let's do that right away. We don't want the agent to handle our environment variables. We're going to do it ourselves by creating a new .env.local, heading back over to our InsForge dashboard under install, at the bottom, there's going to be API keys. It's always great to fetch them in case we need to use them later on. So I'll get the project URL. That's going to be InsForge project URL. And after that, we'll have the next public InsForge URL, as well as the next public InsForge anon key. So prep both of them and then simply paste the keys you can get directly from the dashboard. We can revisit this later on in case we need to update them. But yeah, let's go ahead and check it out. If you head over to your localhost 3000, either open it locally or you can open it up in your browser, click Get Started, and it'll redirect you to this beautifully designed authentication page. And now, one thing that I want to point out here is that we never actually gave it a design for the auth page itself. Keep that in mind. We did give it a design for the landing page, and that included some primitives, some assets that it can use, and the general idea of where we want to take the design of this application. But auth page, we didn't give it a design for. And take a look at just how polished and on brand this looks like. But now the big question is, can we actually log in? I'll go ahead and proceed with Google. And it says, we could not start that sign-in method. Please try again. And I'm actually super glad this happened because I get a chance to show you another one of the skills that I created and that'll become a huge part of your workflow. It's called Recover. So go ahead and open up the chat that you were within, and in the same window, use the Recover skill. So when something goes wrong during build, it's going to diagnose the problem and fix it properly and not just lose its way around it. So in most cases, it's going to be just enough for you to pass the error message that you're seeing. But you can also add some additional context, like authentication is not working properly. Press enter and just watch how it'll recover itself, figure out exactly what the issue is, diagnose the problem, and then make only one targeted change once the root cause is clear. Looks like failure mode 1, a specific thing is broken, and it was able to find it within a second. Root cause, next public InsForge URL is set to an IK key value, not the InsForge backend URL. So we have to make the next public InsForge URL, this one right here. So simply head over into our .env and make sure that the next public InsForge URL is set to an actual URL and not a key that I had right here. This was on me, but again, I'm glad to show you just how powerful the recover skill is. So once you fix the ENVs, you can click Continue with GitHub or Google, Authorize, and you'll be redirected back to your profile. Currently, there's nothing there, but just the fact that we are logged in is perfect. You can go ahead and log out if you want to. That's working as well. Now, if you go to the profile, it's going to bring you back to the auth. And once again, you can just log in. And that's it. We're in. So now that we know that the feature has been implemented properly, we can make use of another skill called Review. So after building a feature, we want to verify that it matches what was planned, respecting the system architecture and design standards, and is ready to proceed. The skill is super quick, less than a minute. It gives us back the findings, the critical one, that OAuth wasn't able to start without the proper ENV, that's on me, that the auth route handlers do not follow the required error handling, okay? Do not wrap the route logic in try-catch, as project standards require every route handler to catch log errors and return human-safe responses. The OAuth buttons use a link to side-effecting API routes. In production, link behavior can include prefetching, navigation optimizations, side effects, and so on. So that's something that we can fix. So it found the issues. The plant pieces are mostly present, login UI, Google, GitHub OAuth routes, and so on. Some issues that we've seen. So now before we move on to implementing the next feature, and you can see it already knows what it is because of our context files, we can tell it to fix it. It quickly noticed that we fixed the ENV issue ourselves, and then it also fixed the following review issues and updated the UI registry for the button and the pattern. So that's great. We'll need to restart the Next.js server to pick up the corrected ENV dev. But yeah, now that everything is done, I also want to run the imprint skill. So after building any UI components, we want to extract the visual patterns that matter for consistency and save them to the UI registry. In this case, it looks like it already updated the UI registry, but just in case it missed some stuff while doing the review, I'll run this skill manually. And in about 10 seconds, it imprinted the login card. So the final thing we need to do is run the remember skill to save what matters at the end of the session, because this was a good one. And you can also run save. And finally, it saved it all in the memory so that in the next session, we can simply run remember restore to pick it up from here. Let's keep building. Now that we have the landing page, the auth, as well as the profile page, I think this is the right point to start tracking what's happening within our application. Because that's the question that most developers never ask until it's too late. How do you know that your app is actually working the way you think it is? Not does it compile, but are users actually finding the jobs within the platform? Are they generating the cover letters or creating their accounts and profiles? Without that data, you're just guessing. And guessing on a product you just shipped is how you end up optimizing the wrong things. That's why I want to introduce PostHog in this stack. It's open source, built for engineers, not marketers, and it includes event tracking, funnels, session replays, feature flags, all within one platform. As we continue developing JobPilot, you'll see exactly what it does. But basically, it tracks every meaningful user action, and it powers the 3 analytics charts that will show on the dashboard. Every job search, every cover letter generated, and every resume that we created for our users. And PostHog will capture it. So let's set it up. Click the PostHog link down in the description and create a free account if you don't have one already. You can choose your region and sign in with any platform that you prefer. If you're creating it for the first time, you need to create a new organization. You can call it something like JSM_, and then enter either your name or the name of your organization. And then also select your role. Most likely it's going to be in engineering. And if you have a second, also you can say JavaScript mastery right here in where did you hear about us. So let's create the organization, and it's going to ask you, what do you want to do with PostHog? In this case, we want to understand how our users behave. That's the closest match to what we're building. We can turn on the product analytics, the session replay, the web analytics, and later on, we'll be able to add all of this additional stuff as well. So let's go. I'll say it out loud. PostHog has the best in-game setup wizard. You just used one single command, and no matter which framework you use, it'll install and set up PostHog and also add the initial event tracking specifically tailored to the application that you're building. So back within the application, you can open up a new terminal and run npx-y, add PostHog wizard add latest, and you can also add the region. I'll expand this so we can see what's happening. It'll likely ask you whether you want to install the PostHog wizard installer. And as it says, let's do 2 hours of work in 8 minutes. Directory recognized, framework is here, and we want to do the PostHog integration. So continue. It's going to ask us to authenticate within our browser. That was quick. And now on the left side, it'll keep telling us some stuff about the agent and how it works, like some helpful tips in a game while it's loading the next level. Here, it's not loading the next level, but rather analyzing our project and setting up its own tasks. First, it needs to plan which events it's going to track. Then it needs to install PostHog, initialize the PostHog client, capture the events, identify users, and finally create the PostHog dashboard. This is going to take a couple of minutes, so go grab some coffee and pause the video, and I'll be right back. And after the setup is done, it'll detect all of the agents we have, and it's asking us whether we want to install the PostHog MCP server and plugin as well. I'll proceed with doing that, and I'll do it for Visual Studio Code and Claude Code, and we'll give it access to everything. Now, what this does is it allows you to just ask your agent plain text questions about some of the funnels or features within your application. And then it can access all of the data from your PostHog dashboard and make more intelligent decisions on implementing some things within the code base. For example, you can ask it, what are the top 5 errors in my project this week? It's going to return it, and then you can continue speaking with your agent to fix them. Or show me a full stack trace for the most recent crash, and then propose a fix. You can go deeper across many different use cases, but yeah, definitely go ahead and install it. So now that PostHog has been initialized, I'll head back over to our agent. We'll start a new codex session. We can tell it to use PostHog to track some events within our current application. Even though we don't have a lot happening right now, it should be able to use the MCP and our current code base and figure out a couple of things it can track already, just so we can verify everything is working. The agent nicely understands that the current UI is still in the auth foundation phase, so most of the approved business events don't have live workflows yet. It's going to add it just for initialization, user identify and reset, and a typed server tracking helper for the approved event names for the profile job flows later on. That's all that I need for now. And there we go. It added a couple of events that allow us to identify our users on logout or when they visit the dashboard and so on. So let's quickly test it out. By heading back over here, I'll sign out. I'll continue with GitHub one more time to log in. Visit the homepage, the profile, the find jobs, and the dashboard. And back within the onboarding, you should be able to see installation complete. If for you, for some reason, it still says that it's waiting for some events to happen, what you can do is click Need to Set Up Manually, choose Next.js, and then right here under the second step, you can manually copy the envs and add them to your .env.local. Then restart the application, log out and log in one more time and switch a couple of pages, and at that time, it should say that it auto-captured something new. Either way, you can click Skip or Next to continue setting up our configuration. I'll leave all of these three options turned on, such as auto-capturing front-end interactions, so that we automatically track clicks, submits, and more. I mean, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't know what to do with that data, but now that we have the AI, it can make sense of it. So you're immediately getting so much more valuable info. Heat maps are useful if you can capture generally where people are clicking, moving their mouse, and scrolling to. And then also Web Vitals, super useful info to have. While we're here, you can also enable session replays because sometimes it might not be clear what's happening just from the clicks. If a user stops scrolling and just stares at one portion of the screen, you want to get in their shoes and see what they're seeing. That's what the session replays are for. So I'll enable them too. And finally, you can choose between one of the two free plans, either pay as you go, starting completely for free, giving you up to 1 million events, 5,000 session recordings, and 1 million feature flag experiments, or for now, you can just start completely for free. That'll bring you directly into your PostHog dashboard. There's a quick start that you can start off with, but also under Browse, you can head over into Activity and check out exactly what is happening within your application. You can see that we're trying to identify some users. Those users are clicking the form and moving across our application. This is just the start. We've started collecting the data, but later on, as we implement some actual features of our app, we'll start making sense of the data. And the biggest help for that is going to be PostHog AI. So stay with me. Let's implement a couple of features together, and then we'll come back to PostHog to show you how to truly understand what your users are actually using your app for and how you can improve it based off of the data that we're now tracking. Great work. Once that is done, you can get back to one of your agent chats and tell it that I've initialized PostHog using the PostHog wizard. So review it by using the review skill. And remember, save what we did. That way, we'll update our context and we'll be able to move directly to the next feature. And this is also a cool little tip that shows you that you can use multiple skills in the same prompt. This took less than a minute. It provided us with a review, everything passed, and it saved it to memory. So in the next lesson, let's focus on maybe the most important part of the app, and that is the database schema. The database schema is the foundation everything else sits on top of. If you get this wrong, you'll be tracing bugs all the way to bad column decisions you made at this point. So this is exactly the moment to use our architect skill before touching anything. So go ahead and open up your agent. And in this case, I actually want to switch over to Claude Code to show you that these context files and the workflow that I'm teaching you is completely agent agnostic. I'll use something like Sonnet on a high effort. Within it, you also want to make sure that you have access to the skills. So if you run something like remember, it needs to be there. If it's not, you can open up the terminal in a new window and run npx skills, add latest, add JavaScript Mastery Pro skills, add all 5 skills, and make sure to add them for Claude Code. Once that is done, you can run remember like this, and say restore to restore the previous session. It'll automatically figure out what we want to do, reading the memory file and project context to restore the session state. Perfect. PostHog got implemented, wired up, and now we have to do the database schema. Now we can use the architect skill to tell it to architect the feature number 4. It'll read all the relevant context files before it talks to us and produce a full implementation plan for the database schema, tables, columns, types, relationships, absolutely everything. And it'll give us that plan so that we can actually review it and tell it whether it's a go or a no-go. And pretty quickly, actually in 30 seconds, the agent came back to me and it looks like it wants to have a conversation. First, it's making sure that we're speaking the same language. Row-level security policy, I understand this as Postgres RLS rule attached to the table that automatically filters every query to only the current user's rows using auth ID. Users can never read or write another user's data, even if they craft a direct API call. Is that right? Yeah, that is right. Authenticated access only. Yep, that is pretty clear. And then schema creation. Yep, this is exactly what we want to do against the InsForge Postgres database, not generating migration files. I think the reason why it's asking me all of these decisions is because I had not the plan mode, but I think I had the thinking turned on. It might not even be necessary. So for now, I'll simply tell it to proceed with suggested decisions. And then it'll get the implementation plan and start working on it. There we go. This is a pretty hefty plan, 12 steps. Confirm, and I'll start building. And I'm super glad it asked me to confirm because we installed the InsForge MCP for Codex, but to make it truly agnostic, you also have to install it for the other agent you're using. So back within InsForge, you can click install, go ahead and choose Claude Code, which is the first version, and you can do it either through CLI or MCP. Either way works. Let's do CLI this time. I'll just tell it, I confirm, but before, do the following. And then paste what we have. So that way it'll get all the information about InsForge and it'll know how to set up our InsForge database properly. The InsForge CLI is now installed and linked, and now it'll load the InsForge skills before proceeding. That's exactly what I meant when I said that InsForge was built agentic from the ground up. So agents can work with it so naturally and build entire backend systems with auth, databases, and more. There we go. Clean slate, no tables, no migrations. Let's proceed with the full implementation. I'm assuming this one will take a bit longer, so pause the video and I'll be right back. And after doing some thinking and implementing and then thinking and reading and writing, it finalized the feature, updated the progress tracker and the UI registry. So phase 1 with features from 0 to 4, 4 being the database schema, are now completed. It updated the progress tracker, and it applied the migrations. The backend through InsForge is now built. 4 tables applied via CLI migrations. There's tables for profiles, agent runs, jobs, and agent logs, all of which are going to start making sense very soon as we start adding the features. Only the authenticated users can perform operations, and the rest of the stuff has been completed. Now, if you head back over to InsForge, specifically under database, you'll see 4 different tables, which means that all of them have been successfully created. The agent didn't write a migration file or configure a connection string. It created all 4 tables directly through the InsForge MCP. And that's what agent native infrastructure looks like in practice. Agent logs is going to be the agent's paper trail. Like every step that it takes during a run will get written right here with info, success, warnings, errors. So if something goes wrong during a job search, this is where you find out exactly what happened and why. But again, that's going to start making more sense soon. Agent runs. Every LinkedIn search the agent performs gets logged right here. Job title searched, location, how many jobs were found, when it started and completed. This is how the dashboard knows what searches happened. Finally, the jobs. Every job discovered or imported, match score, cover letter, specifically made for each user. That's the entire job hunting history in one table. And then there are the profiles. Every user's career data will live right here. name, skills, experience, resume, LinkedIn context ID. This is what the agent reads when it scores a job against you. And if you open up storage, here you'll see just empty resumes. Every resume operation in this app will read and write to this bucket. And since we can already see the 4 database tables and the storage bucket, that tells us that everything has been implemented properly. So you can run /remember to use the remember skill and say save. It'll figure out that we wanted to use the remember skill and update the memory. So if you check it out, you'll see that the phase 1 foundation is 100% complete, features 1 to 4. Live InsForge backend has all 4 tables, 20 RLS policies, 2 triggers, and 1 private storage bucket. Types exists. No app level code touches the DB yet. That's going to start soon in phase 2. And it says that these open questions from previous sessions haven't been resolved. I didn't consider them that important, but it's good that it's keeping track. So from the next lesson onward, we'll start focusing on the profile page UI. And considering that the phase 1 is now done, I think it's due time to actually push this code over to GitHub. So head over to github.com/new and create a new repo, which you can call JobPilot or whichever name you prefer. Then just create it, and you can push over to it by opening the terminal. And we can do this manually. And even though you don't have to do this manually, you can just copy and paste all that into your agent. Old habits die hard. So I'll say git init, git add dot, git commit -m, implement everything up to phase 1, git branch -m, main, git remote add origin, and finally git push u origin main. Perfect. Now, if you go back and reload, you'll be able to see your code appear right here. And I always like to clean it up a bit so you can hide the releases, deployments, and packages. Give it some topics such as agentic workflows, because that's what we're working on right here. Later on, we'll be able to add the deployed version or deployed link of our application. And for now, we can give a quick description of the app. I believe our agent already wrote that for us right here in the root of the application. AI-powered job search assistance for matching roles, tailored resumes, and faster applications. You never know who's looking at your profile, and it's always good to tidy it up a bit and to stay consistent. So now that the latest changes have been pushed, we are ready to start focusing on phase 2 of the application. Great job coming this far. And let's dive right into the phase 2. If you head over into the build plan, you'll see that our database schema is done and we are ready to begin phase 2, which is the profile page. Starting with the UI, you always want to separate the concerns. Do the UI first and then the logic second. So in this case, we'll first build the complete profile page with UI with mock data without save logic. Within the UI, the profile will need the attention banner at the top, completion percentage ring, missing field tags highlighted, and so on, connected account section, resume section, profile information form with clearly labeled sections, and then save profile button at the bottom. So let's simply open up a new window. I'll head over to Claude Code and I'll tell it to remember, but specifically restore what we remembered before. It'll read the memory file and restore our session. There we go. Now it knows exactly what we focused on. So the next thing we have to do is simply tell it to build a profile UI. And just so it stops asking these open questions, I'll say you can close the open questions, and then we can tell it to build the complete profile exactly as shown in the profile.png. That's going to be within context designs profile, and run it. Let's give it some time to implement it, and then we'll go over it together. After getting the full context, it's going to start building the profile page components. It'll start by writing some to-dos for itself. Looking at the design, it needs to build these components: the profile attention banner, the connected accounts, resume section, profile form, and then update the page to compose everything. Then it formed that into a list of to-dos, and it'll proceed working on them one by one. And after a couple of minutes, after it implemented it, it also updated both context files in parallel: the progress tracker where it now says that it implemented the profile page UI, as well as it marked it as complete right here. It also modified the UI registry to add the components that now it knows how to build, and it gave us a quick rundown of everything that was implemented. So what do you say that we go ahead and check it out? Back within the application, if you head over to the profile page, you should be able to see something that looks like this. Oh, and before, as I was building the application, I first experienced an issue with the redirect to the profile page. This specifically happens when you sign out and then try to sign back in. If that happens to you, you can very easily fix it by telling the agent what's happening. Run the review, fix the homepage button, and make sure that the profile page is accessible after login. So take a look at how well this matches the design of our application. Even without comparing it to the original, it's looking amazing. But if there's something that is off, you can simply take a screenshot from here and also take a screenshot from the final design and tell it to fix it. So profile is 70% done. We need to insert some more information for better matches. We'll soon need to connect our LinkedIn account. Then here we'll be able to upload our resume, enter our profile information, and with all of that info, soon enough, this application will simplify our job application process significantly. In this case, it already updated the UI registry, but in case you want to be sure, you can just run imprint manually, and then it'll check whether it added some new components that we might want to reuse later on. It says this was already done during the build session, so that's amazing. With that in mind, you can simply run remember save to save what we did in this session. That'll save it to our memory, which means that immediately in the next lesson, we can start working on the profile save logic. So let's do that next. Now that the UI is done, let's wire it up. The profile form looks good, but it doesn't do anything yet. No saves, no database writes, and no file uploads. So let's change that. First, we want to open up the chat and we want to restore the latest session. Or in this case, since we're working just on the profile, the UI first and now the logic, we can keep it within the same page. What we want to do in this lesson has some real logic behind it, through server actions, file uploads, through InsForge storage, completion tracking, and path revalidation. So before the agent touches any of it, we need to plan it. So switch over to the plan mode. You can do that right here from edit to plan mode, and then use the architect skill that we have and tell it to architect the feature 06 and press enter. Feature 06 is obviously coming from the build plan. So if you take a look at right here, you'll see that we need to wire up the profile form to InsForge DB through server actions, resume uploaded to InsForge storage, resume PDF saved to profiles, is complete set to true, completion percentage and missing fields calculated, form pre-filled with existing data, and revalidate on save. So let's see how well it's going to plan the feature, and then we can actually start executing it. And it thought through all the key decisions and wrote the plan. The plan is thorough and aligns with the project architecture, so it's just going to verify InsForge storage SDK types and any existing usage, and then it has everything it needs. It created its plan right here under feature 06 profile save logic. You can even review it. This is the full plan, and we can open it and preview it in Markdown. So think of this as a more detailed version of our build plan right here. Using the architect skill in plan mode makes it super powerful. And I think it started building it out on its own. So after you review the plan, you can switch back to the editing mode. Again, Sonnet with medium or high thinking is going to be enough because it doesn't have to do the thinking. It has to just write code, which has become a commodity nowadays. It's all about the thinking. So now we can simply say to implement the feature 06. So picking exactly where we left off, it'll start implementing the full logic. A couple of minutes after, the feature 06 is now complete. And here's what was built. It added the actions file. Under actions, it added a profile.ts action file with two actions, save profile and upload resume. And then under profile utils, it added a calculate completion shared between page and server action. It also modified 5 additional files. So now we want to test the form by saving some real info and then reload the page to check whether it's working properly. Make sure your application is running on localhost 3000. You can see that now we're at 0%, and we can start filling in some info. I'm Adrian, add JS Mastery. For some reason, I cannot enter my email, most likely because it should be picked from my account, but okay, we're gonna look into this later. Here, you can enter the phone number. For now, I'll enter some random numbers. Location, let's go with New York, maybe one day. Then you can enter your LinkedIn URL as well as your GitHub one. For work, you can choose your work authorization, some professional info, experience level, years of experience, technologies you're proficient in. Notice how nicely it adds these chips as you type, industries worked in, and then you can add work experience. I mean, this is a pretty hefty form and it would take a lot of time to design and develop it, but here it just feels so natural. We can do JS Mastery. Of course, here you would actually be entering the data for yourself. I don't remember when we started it, but it's going to be about 10 years now. Oh, and there's no end date in sight. Key responsibilities? I guess everything. Of course, you can be a bit more detailed, so you give your AI a bit more info to work with. You can go ahead and fill in your education, which year you graduated, institution name, and so on, and which position are you seeking, whether you want it to be remote or on-site, and then an optional salary expectation. Cover letter, we can make it concise, and prefer locations if you have any. Go ahead and save the profile. It says profile saved successfully, which is great. So now if you reload, oops, it looks like it didn't save what we just wrote. I guess I should have tested it by filling it just a couple of spots and not everything. But that's fine, because this is the perfect place to use the review skill. I'll simply turn on the review and tell it form saving doesn't work. And now it'll review the type of bug we're experiencing, figure out exactly where it's coming from, and figure out a way to fix it. So let's give it a minute. Very quickly, it came back with a full review. Developer reports form saving doesn't work. It figured out that there's a couple of mismatches. Server actions are called directly from client components. They require being imported and called as functions, which is what the code does. So this part should work. Server actions inside start transition in Next.js must be called differently. Okay, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the fix. So it posed some other issues that it found, a couple of critical ones, a couple of important ones, and then a minor one. Resolve issues 1, 2, and 3 before moving on. So I'll simply say resolve, and then we'll retest it. And very quickly, it applied all 3 fixes. So now if I try changing my name right here to something like Adrian, and then click Save Profile, it's going to say Save Profile successfully. The name is going to remain there, but then when I reload, it's actually gone. So it still didn't fix it. I'll add review one more time and tell it that even though we get profile saved successfully after clicking the button, after reloading, the data is still not being saved. Let's give it a second chance. This is the first time it actually didn't fix it right after the first one. And about 2 minutes after, it's back with another solution. The proxy.ts file exists with the correct route protection logic, but it is not wired as a Next.js middleware. Next middleware must be in a file named exactly middleware.ts at the project root. Proxy is therefore never executed. But I'm not sure whether this is correct, because if you take a look at the latest page of the docs directly in Next.js, it's now called a proxy. Starting with Next.js 16, middleware is now called a proxy. The functionality remains the same. So the way it works, you create a proxy file instead of a middleware file. And if you go ahead and search for middleware, rewrites you to proxy. So in this case, I think the AI made a mistake. So what we can do next is tell it once again to review its implementation by checking the documentation page that we found and then verifying his claim about the issue number 1 that it specified. Sometimes you still have to take the wheel, and immediately, in a matter of seconds, it retracted what it thought was wrong about the code. So 3rd time's the charm. Let's see if it can actually fix it now, or will I have to teach you some other way to fix these types of issues where AI really loses its mind. Either way works for me, and that's because these videos are unscripted, as it's the only way you can really learn a lot from them. Okay, so now it came back with 2 fixes, backfill the missing profile row. So it's gonna insert some of the info that was missing from before, and then detect the 0 rows updated in Save Profile. Okay, sure, that's a very simple fix. So let's see whether that's gonna make a big change. Very quickly, both fixes got applied. So if we head back over here, you'll see that now our email is getting pre-filled from our authentication info, which is great. And if I enter my name and click Save Profile, it actually jumped up to 22%, and my name is filled in. And it's there even after I reload. So let me go ahead and fill out some more fields. For example, the full personal info part, and click Save. It's still here, and we're now at 44%. So just so you don't have to watch me refill everything I've done before, I'll go ahead and pause the recording, and then you can do the same thing on your end, and we can continue then. And finally, we're at 100. Potentially, after we upload the resume, it's going to say that the profile doesn't need any more attention, but right now it says 100%, so it is a bit misleading. I'll simply take a screenshot, go back to the code and hold Shift to be able to drag and drop files into it, and then I'll tell it when at 100%, it shouldn't say profile needs attention. Fix it. This is just a very simple corrective fix. There we go. It is done. So now when you're at 100, that banner will simply disappear. So let's update the progress tracker and run remember save to save all of it to the memory. After that is done, the profile now saves. And if I'm not mistaken, the resume form should allow us to upload them already. So I'll simply Google for a fake resume.pdf and I'll download it as a PDF. And then you can simply drag and drop it. Notice how nice this looks like. It'll upload it. Resume uploaded successfully. And if you reload, we'll also be able to view the current resume if we had the permissions to do so. That's a little fix that we can make. When we click on that button, we can't actually see it. So I'll copy this error and say review. When clicking on view current resume, it leads to, and then you can paste the URL that it leads to, and then say what it shows. It'll analyze it, figure out what the issue is, and allow us to preview the resume that we just uploaded. The diagnosis is thankfully very straightforward, as it says right here. The issue is that the get public URL was used on a private bucket, which was architecturally wrong, as the build plan states to create resume's storage bucket with authenticated access only, and feature 04 explicitly created it as private. So we should instead use the download via server route handler instead. So let's just say resolve. There we go. The changes got applied. So now if we view the current resume, it'll simply download it and display it in the browser. Wonderful. Profile saved, resume uploaded, URL written back to the database. And there was zero infrastructure that we had to manage. InsForge handled the storage, the database write, the RLS policies, and we just told the app what to save. Most backend platforms were built for humans clicking through dashboards. InsForge was built from the ground up for the agents. The MCP gives Codex or Claude Code direct access to your schema, migrations, auth, and storage, all without leaving the session. They just relaunched as the open source AWS for coding agents and shipped backend branching, Git-style branching for your entire backend so your agent can experiment safely without touching production. It's open source, Y Combinator backed, and again, I'll leave the link down in the description to check it out. But yeah, this is great. With that, the full profile page is done. So in the next step, we have to make AI extract the additional profile data from the resume. So let's do that next. The profile form now works. So let's make it smart. Right now, users have to fill in all of this information manually. And let's be honest, nowadays people have troubles filling in just their first, last name, and maybe the age, let alone this many fields. So instead, with the feature that we're going to implement right now, they will upload their resume, hit one button, and an AI will read that PDF and fill every field that it can automatically find. Name, skills, work experience, education, all populated within a couple of seconds. The user just has to review it, edit it if needed, and save it. So let's dive right in. Let's open up one of our chats that we had right before, start a new one, and we're going to use the remember restore skill to load up the memory. Now for this feature, I chose GPT-4o to extract all of this info, which means that we'll need an API key. So head over to platform.openai.com and sign in. Once you're in, you can create your API key, call it something like JobPilot, and create it. Then copy it, and back within our application, under .env.local, you can write OpenAI _API _key and paste the key you just copied. Make sure that you have at least some kind of a subscription over an OpenAI or whichever other AI API key you decide to use. I'm sure you'll find one somewhere, because nowadays it's always useful to have your AI API key on top of the agents that we chat with, such as ChatGPT, or that we code with, such as Claude Code. Again, you can use any model from Anthropic, Gemini, or whatever you're comfortable with. It's the same pattern, just grab the key. Once you have it, let's go back to our chat and tell it that the OpenAI API key is already in .env.local, and we simply wanted to architect the feature 7. You can see that it even has that in mind. It says run architect for feature 7, AI profile extraction from resume, flow button, download PDF from InsForge, then PDF parse extracts text, then GPT-4o returns structured JSON, form fields populate, and user reviews and saves it manually. So this is exactly correct. I'll say correct. OpenAI is there. Architect feature 07. Again, you can run this in plan mode so that it gives you back the plan, but it doesn't touch the code base yet until you verify how it looks like. So that once it actually comes back with a plan, we can say implement feature 07, and we can turn it to edit automatically mode. But again, let's see what it comes back with. And it came back with a complete plan. I thought switching it from plan to edit mode mid-prompt, it's not going to switch it immediately, but it looks like it did. So it already started implementing that plan. If that's the case, that's okay with me. I'll just occasionally give it additional permissions. If it didn't automatically start working for you on the feature, instead if it gave you a plan, then you can simply tell it to implement feature 07, and then it'll proceed going through the steps. And in about 2 minutes, feature 7 is now complete. It added only one new file, the profile page client, which is a thin client wrapper that owns the ref bridging the resume section and the profile form. And then it went ahead and modified a couple of files, such as the profile actions file, inside of which it added the extract profile server action, which takes it from InsForge storage, extracts it, sends it over to GPT-4o, and then returns the extracted profile. And then in the resume section, there's now an extract profile button. So let's go ahead and test it by heading back to your application, uploading your resume. It looks like here I uploaded a fake profile, but it might be better to upload your real developer profile. I found something like this. This is John Doe. So I've downloaded it in PDF and uploaded it right here. So now click extract profile and it'll tell you failed to extract profile from resume. Back within the application, it looks like we get an error, which is great, setting up fake worker failed with a reason.message. So what we can do is open up the chat and tell it to use the review feature and say, when clicking extract profile, I get this message, and in the console, and now we can copy and paste what it says right here. I get this. And now based on the review skill and the additional info that we pass it, it should be able to figure out what went wrong and fix it. So let's give it some time. And very quickly, the fix is in. Here's what changed. PDF parse v2 is built on PDF.js dist and always spawns a web worker. When the server action runs inside of the Next.js bundle, Webpack can't resolve their worker file path because it only exists at a browser relative URL, not in server chunks. So what it needed to do is remove the PDF parse from the actions and replace it with the direct usage. Set the global worker, add the server external packages, and we should now be able to extract the profile properly. Let's check if it's uploaded, and then click extract profile. Once again, it says fail to extract, and if we open up the terminal, the issue seems to be more or less the same. Before, it happened right here under actions profile, but now it's happening right here under API resume download and then the error happens. So I'll once again provide all of that info to it and tell it review, still the same issue, and I'll paste it in. And let's see what it says now. And very quickly, it says that resolves the correct absolute path. Restart your dev server for the changes to take effect. So stop it from running and rerun npm run dev. Then head back and reload the page. If needed, re-upload the resume and then click extract profile. Once again, it fails. Now with the reason of invalid URL. So I'll copy it one more time and tell it to review it and paste the error. Two things are still wrong, so it'll try to fix them. And in about half a minute, we have another try. Once again, we'll stop the server from running and then rerun it on localhost 3000 and try to extract it again. This time, we're hit with an even nastier error, a full page one, but thankfully it is just as easy to copy it and pass it over to our review skill. Hopefully this time it gets it right. And in about 5 seconds, it says clean, restart the dev server and try again. The profile page will now load without error, and extract profile will call GPT-4o and populate the form. Okay, it is very confident that this is going to work. So let me try to rerun it, go back on the page. Just for good measure, I will re-upload the resume by heading over into JobPilot and uploading it here. I think it's going to get uploaded successfully. And now let's extract the profile. First of all, we don't get an error. Rather, there's a loading segment right here where it says extracting. And check it out. It extracted it. Profile fields filled in, review, and save below. Yep, here is our John Doe with the phone number, location set to Cupertino, California, LinkedIn URL. The portfolio URL is also picked up correctly, but this was a dummy resume, so that's why it says yourwebsite.com. For you, it's going to be correct. We are a mid-level software engineer with 19 years of experience, and take a look at how it up on all of these different skills, industries worked in, as well as the work experience, including the company name, job title, start date and end date, as well as the key responsibilities. This is going to be super useful when matching it to job postings. So it'll be able to take your previous work experience and then match it against your potential new jobs to tell your employers just why you would be the perfect fit. We also worked at Microsoft, high school, computer science. Yep, all of this is great. And some of the stuff also got filled in. So I'll go ahead and click Save Profile. And this is it. That's the feature that we wanted to implement. So we can simply tell it it's working now. And then it can update the progress tracker and run remember save to save this session. With that, now that our resume uploads, GPT-4o or whichever AI you chose extracts it, the forms fill automatically and you can verify it and save it. In the next lesson, we'll build the resume generation feature from the profile info. So you can also do it the other way around. This is going to be a full job application platform, so I wanted to make it feature-packed to help you with your job search. There we go. The memory updated. Feature 7 is working. So in the next lesson, let's focus on getting it to generate the resumes. Now we're going to implement the resume generation feature. So quickly head over into the build plan, preview it in Markdown, and then head over to 08 resume generation from profile. Since I didn't write these 9 detailed technical documents by hand, I worked with AI to define them based on the project requirements, which means that occasionally something gets missed as you build. And this is one of those moments. If you take a look at the logic for feature 08, it says React renderer right here. Technically correct, but something critical is missing. A resume isn't just a formatted list of data. It needs a professional summary, polished work experience, bullet points, coherent language throughout, right? So if we implement this as written without AI, the agent will just dump all the raw data into a PDF layout. Name here, skills here, bullet points here. All of it is technically correct, but completely useless as an actual resume. So before we implement it, we need to fix the build plan to include GPT 4.0. So you can tell it something like, let's go to the edit mode, generate a clean professional PDF resume from current profile data using GPT 4.0. Below the read point, you can say GPT 4.0 generates professional resume context, a summary paragraph, polished work experience, and clean professional language throughout. That's the fix. And you can update these context files during the implementation or whenever you're adding a new feature. That way, you can maintain the codebase and continuously build new features using AI in an existing codebase. So once we're done with the current features, you can always go down and simply add phase 5, feature 26. Now, go ahead and open up a new session. I'll proceed with Claude Code and simply tell it to restore what we previously worked on. This feature will have some real logic and AI work involved, GPT 4.0 content generation, PDF rendering, and so on. So we need to plan before we build. Tell it to architect the feature 08 in plan mode. And let's give it some time for it to actually plan it out. And in a couple of minutes, the full plan is right here. And I just noticed this. You can actually review it, select text, and add comments directly on the plan. Pretty cool. But yeah, the idea is to add the resume PDF generation from profile. Here it defines the language, what it means to generate, download, and so on, the decisions that it's going to take, the files which you want to change, and then the implementation steps. You can go through it, review it all in detail, leave some comments if you want to, and then that's it. Thankfully, it also provides a list of things that it'll verify before it calls it finished. So if you open up your chat right here, it'll say the plan is now done, which means that you can just either tell it to implement it or it'll have already started implementing it on its own. And there we go. In about a minute, the feature 8 is now complete. It built the API route to generate it, post handler, and a server-only PDF component with the header, summary, skills, work experience, and so on, as well as it modified the resume section to add a generate resume from profile button. So if you go back to your profile and click generate resume from profile, now it'll do it the other way around. It'll take this data and generate a nice looking resume. And check this out. John Doe, software engineer, Cupertino, California, professional experience right here, skills, work experience, and the education. This is amazing. And if you think that you should have some kind of dots, lines, colors, no, no, and no, this concise, simple, black and white, text-only document is what professional developers use to get hired. And now you can do that too. Of course, as you fill it in with more work experience, education, and some other information, it'll perfectly fit on a single page, which is what you want. So that's amazing. This feature has been completed properly. Now, if this didn't work for you for whatever reason, AI is unpredictable, you can always use the review skill and tell it that there's no download button for the generated resume. Or if something else is not working, you can just tell it to recover the feature 08, ask it to read the context build plan, and then implement it properly. Sometimes some back and forth will be needed, but as you saw, for me, it worked perfectly on the first try. So don't forget to just update the context progress tracker and the UI registry if needed. And in the same command, you can also run remember save. With that in mind, the resume generation is now done. GPT 4.0 writes the content, React PDF renderer renders it, and InsForge storage holds it. So if you go back to your InsForge dashboard, you'll be able to find your resume right here and either preview it or just download it. Great stuff. And that's phase 2 done. The whole profile side is built. From the form, the resume upload, AI extraction, and resume generation. JobPilot now knows who the user is and what they're looking for. Phase 3 is where the app starts earning its name, actually finding jobs. But one small cleanup first. When I built a profile page, I dropped in a connected accounts placeholder, this thing right here. But I decided not to use it for this build. That's because scraping LinkedIn jobs is actually against their terms of service. So, not to get your account banned, I decided to switch it up a bit. And that's the whole point of this workflow, to show you how we can pivot the app idea while we're building it. Because you'll never be able to know exactly where you want to take this app as you're building it. So a simple cleanup is going to look something like this. You can open up a Claude window and then tell it to remove the connected account section from the top of the profile page. Leave the LinkedIn URL field in personal info. Don't touch anything else. We essentially want to get rid of this connected accounts part and only focus on the resume and the profile information. This change should be pretty simple because it just removes a single piece of UI. You can see it removed it as I was speaking and then reloaded the page to show without it, which allows us to move to phase 3 of our application. So let me tell you a bit more about that in the next lesson. And welcome to phase 3 of our application. The goal is to develop a Find Jobs page. First, starting with a full UI, and then in the next lesson, we'll hook it up with the functionality. So the goal is to build a full Find Jobs page UI with mock data, no logic yet. Again, that's coming in the next lesson. And wanted to have search controls card at the top with a job title label plus location label, and then Find Jobs button with a search icon. And then we want to list the section, allowing people to filter them, show the jobs within a table that says company, role, match, score based on your resume, and then allow the users to paginate it. So that's going to be pretty simple. We can go ahead and open up a new session. Within it, run remember restore, so it knows what we last worked on. And once it remembers, we can now tell it to build feature 09 exactly as shown in, and now we're passing a design. So if you head over to designs and we're looking at the Find Jobs page, we want it to look something like this. So there's a search card at the top, and then there's a table where we can see all the jobs that we can find. First, starting, as I said, with mock data, and then immediately in the next lesson, we'll make it fully functional by using an API. So let's give it some time to read through it and then get it implemented. And in about 2 minutes, it collected everything it needs, gave itself a list of to-dos to implement, and slowly but surely, in the next minute or so, it built the full UI. It also updated the progress tracker as well as the UI registry. And with that, feature 09 is now complete. Let's go ahead and check it out. Back within our application, there's now a second page we can check out, the Find Jobs page. And would you look at that? The design is looking perfect. I would actually say this is a real application that we can now check out. And if I search by job title, maybe filter it by Vercel, 8 jobs and 4 strong matches. But of course, this is not yet fully functional. So if I search for design, as in design engineer, it's not going to filter it yet properly. But as soon as we implement the functionality in the next lesson, it'll work just fine. What's working now is the sort, oldest and newest, or by the match score, as you can see right here. This is going to be a pretty useful application as soon as the jobs are here and they don't lead to a 404. So with that, the UI is now done. Search controls, the jobs table, filters, pagination, all of it sitting on mock data. Next, we need to make it real so that the agent goes out and actually finds jobs for the user search. Don't forget to run remember save so it knows what we just did. And let's implement the job discovery functionality, as that's where the real work starts. The Find Jobs page looks the part with the profile and rest of the app, but it's empty. So it's time to fill it with the real jobs. And we'll use the Adzuna Jobs API to pull the listings from all across the web. You know an API is good when there's like 4 different paid ads competing directly for your name. But yeah, we definitely want to go with the original one. What it does is it searches through thousands of job sites so that you don't have to. You can go on it, zoom in to verify that you are a human, and I guess you have to select a couple of different buckets. You just have to give it a title and a location, and it'll give you back real jobs. Then we'll use GPT-4o to score each one of these jobs against your profile. It's clean, simple, and has no scraping. So wait, is this thing that we're building basically just an API wrapper? Well, not at all. Adzuna will handle the discovery, but once a user finds a job they like, they still need to research the company. What do they actually build? What's their engineering culture like? And is this even a place worth applying to? And that's exactly what Browserbase is built for. Browserbase is a cloud browser. It opens up a real browser session in the background, visits the company's websites, and then pulls back everything worth knowing. We'll use it to build a full company research feature right on the job details page. So before the user clicks apply, they already know exactly who they're applying to. More on that soon. But for now, create a free account on developer.adzuna.com. So that's not this website, it's their developer version. That looks something like this. Outdated, I know, but this is typically how all the API websites look like. You can head over to registration page and fill in your info, such as the username, the email right here, the password, and some additional details. For the organization, you can enter JS Mastery. It's going to be for personal research, and I think we're not going to have a lot of monthly visitors. So go ahead and sign up, or at least you'll be able to sign up after you enter a password that is more than 15 characters long. At least they think about security. And then when you sign up, you'll have to verify it via email, and then you'll be able to log in with your email and password. Then head over to Dashboard, go to API Access Details, and here you can find your application ID and the key. Go ahead and copy both, starting with the application ID. We'll paste it here under our .env.local, right here by saying Adzuna app ID. And then after that, we're going to have the Adzuna app key. So let's also copy the key and paste it here. That's the entire setup. No SDK to install, no package to add. Adzuna is just a plain REST API, just a fetch call. So don't forget to restore a session, because now we're going to actually use that API and build on top of it. So run remember, and then restore. And since this is going to be a logic-heavy feature, Adzuna API call, then GPT-4o to score per job, DB writes, PostHog events, we need to plan before we build. So switch over to plan mode right here, and then tell it to check the library docs for the Adzuna API patterns, and then architect the feature number 10. This is going to take some time until it comes up with a plan. Then we'll be able to check it out and provide some feedback, or just tell it to implement it. And in about a minute, the plan is in. I like how Claude auto opens the full plan, allows us to add comments, or just auto accept it right here. So the goal right here is, now that the Find Jobs page is complete with UI and mock data, to implement feature 10, which wires it to Adzuna's Job Discovery API. It'll go and edit a couple of files, then use GPT-4o to match it against our current resume or the details that we have left in. So let's go ahead and auto accept the updates and give it another minute to implement them. And after a while, feature 10 is now complete, and here's what was built. Adzuna lib file. This is a single file that simply searches for jobs. Just a very simple API call. Then it created a post handler that matches and scores the jobs, and also adds that as a PostHog event, and finally displays it all on the page. So what do you say that we test it out? Back on localhost 3000, if you reload, there's going to be no jobs found yet. So let's test it. Let's search for a backend developer job in the US. Find jobs, and internal server error with a green background. Okay, not something we want to see, but hopefully we get more information back right here in the terminal. It looks like we got a 401, okay, Adzuna API error. Maybe if I reload the application so that it gets the proper env keys, that might be a good start. And I'll try it one more time, which is going to give me, unfortunately, the same error. We're going to take this and simply paste it over to our agent using the recover skill. Looks like it went without the additional info, so I'll pass it the info. And let's see what it says. This is failure mode 1, root cause 401 unauthorized. Oh, it's Adzuna app li instead of a key. That's a mistake on my end. Or no, wait, it's not. Why did it actually refer to it as a rename Adzuna app li? Oh, maybe while I was viewing that file that it created, this one right here, I might have accidentally switched it, or maybe it actually misspelled it. Either way, it should be good now. So we need to restart our developer server, head back over here, search for a backend developer position in the US, and click Find Jobs. This time it's loading for a bit of a longer duration, and hopefully we'll see some real jobs start appearing in the table. It was loading for some time, but we actually got back the response. These are real jobs appearing in a table with company names, roles, most importantly, the match score, which matches against our actual profile data, the source, and the date found, as well as a salary estimate. You can also search for one. For example, I see Vantor right here. You can see there's two. Or maybe I can search for the Java keyword right here, which it picks up from the role. So with that in mind, the Find Jobs page is now alive, with real jobs and real scores pulled from Adzuna and matched against the user's profile by GPT-4. Every job Adzuna returned got scored and saved to InsForge in real time. But I went ahead and queried it 3 times, so that's 30 jobs, 30 database rights, and all scoped to the current user. RLS policies make sure that users can only see their own data, and we define that once in the schema, but InsForge will now enforce it across every query automatically. Next, we need to wire up the filters, sort, and pagination so the job list actually becomes useful. Don't forget to run remember, and then save so that we can focus on pagination, filtering, and sorting next. Now that the jobs are loading, let's make the list actually useful. Right now, everything shows in one flat list, with very little way to filter it, sort it, or paginate it. This feature will wire all of that to real InsForge data. So let's go ahead and open up a new chat window, and let's restore the previous session by telling it remember restore. This one is straightforward. Pure DB queries or the fully defined in the build plan. So if you want to check it out, you can open up the build plan and check out the phase number 3, specifically the filtering, pagination, and sorting feature. We simply need to wire the filter tabs, sort to dropdown, text search, and pagination to real InsForge data. Let's do it. You can just tell it to implement the feature 11, and let's give it a second. In about 2 minutes, feature now is now complete with the get handler that queries InsForge data. So if you head back over here, you'll now see that we have 10 posts still. Let's go ahead and search for something like front-end developer in the US again. And it found some jobs and it added them right here to the list. So now we have 1 out of 20. I think the pagination is actually set to 20, so that's why it says that we don't have more pages. But we can still sort it by low match, you can see right here, as well as a high match. So those are the 70s and above. That's the filtering, sorry. And then if we show all matches, we can also sort it by match score or sort it from newest to oldest as well. And you can also search for a specific title. So if we go with Java, you can see here it is. Or maybe we go with something like React. You can see we have 2 React opportunities, but unfortunately 0 that are a high match. So now that that is done, you can also run remember save to save it. And in the next lesson, we'll implement the page that opens up when you click on a specific job. Because right now, it goes to a 404. So let's do that next. In this lesson, we're building the page where everything comes together. The full job description, how well it matches the user's profile, and which skills they have and which they're missing, as well as the company research section that's going to be the star of the build. For now, if you click on a job, you'll get to a 404. So let's build a page that'll show right here. You can open up a new chat. Feel free to use Codex or Claude Code or whatever. I'll randomly switch back to Codex just to show you that this workflow is fully agnostic. I'll tell it to build the feature 12 exactly as shown in job details. This is actually going to be coming from designs, job details right here. So we want to build a page that looks something like this. We want to know why it's matching, as well as fetch all the additional data about that. And then this company research part is going to be the star of the show. We'll do that with Browserbase, but more on that soon. So let's tell AI to build the feature number 12. And after researching it all in about 2 minutes, it figured out what it needs to do, and it's applying the edits. And even though in about 2 minutes it was already more or less done, it took another 4 to verify that it did everything correctly. I guess that's the difference between Claude and Codex, if you want to compare them. Codex always tries to be a bit too sure, and then it checks everything and makes sure that it is done. If you want to stay on the safe side, well, that's good. And I also like how it gives me the progress tracker update, as well as the UI registry tracker updates right here, and then all the edited files below. So you can quickly check out what it did. So what do you say that we go ahead and test it out? Oh, this is actually looking amazing. The 404 that I was on immediately transitioned over to a full-on page. This is a backend developer job at TriOptis LLC, 75% match score, a pretty hefty salary. And I noticed that most of these backend developer jobs have above 100K salary, which I guess makes the ultimate backend course one of the best courses to take. I'll finalize it and prepare some lessons as soon as I finish the agentic development course. So both of these courses are currently in progress. The waitlist is going to be down in the description. The AI course is coming soon, as that's the most needed skill right now. And then once you master that, getting better at foundations of backend is going to be the next thing that's going to significantly increase your salary. So that's the next thing to focus on. Now here we can see the AI match reasoning, where the candidate's Java and SQL skills are a good match for this position. Requires Java 11 and database experience. Also requires cloud and microservices, which are not explicitly stated in the candidate's profile. So that's something that we can continue working on. You have these skills, and these are the gap. There's a job description right here that you can check out. We can make it so that you can expand the job description to check it out in more details. And I think that's a quick review that we can give it by quickly heading back and telling it review, and then say job description is being cut off mid-sentence. If it's longer than what the preview allows, find a way to display it. And then I'll provide an example right here of how it gets cut. This should be pretty simple for it to fix. So I'll just go here and wait for the website to update. And there we go. The reason why we actually cut it is because I believe the API provides it cut. So there's this view full job post, which takes us to the full job where we can actually open up the description and then apply to that job. And if we check out some other jobs, you can see how they look like too. With that in mind, here we definitely created some new components so we can run imprint to update our UI registry if that hasn't happened already. And then once that is done, we can save the session by running remember and then save. I like how on Codex, it actually figures out that this is an active skill, so you know what you're calling. Again, it's pretty cool to be able to use these different tools and then notice the differences. But once you figure out how the workflow works, you'll be able to optimize it no matter the agent that you use. This lesson and the feature we'll implement within it is the part that I'm most excited about. Instead of you opening 10 tabs to figure out what a company actually does, like Rayomind Software Solutions LLC, let's create an agent that when you click this research company button, opens a real browser, visits the company's website, reads what it finds, and pulls all of it into a clean research file. What they do, their tech stack, their culture, and any talking points for your interview. All before you ever click apply. By doing that research, comparing it against the job description that you then compare against your profile is what's going to give you the upper hand when applying for jobs. And this is exactly where Browserbase and Stagehand do the heavy lifting. Browserbase gives us a real managed browser running in the cloud, not a headless scraper, an actual browser session, just like you'd open Chrome. And then if you head over to Docs and search for Stagehand, you'll see that it sits on top of it and lets the agent interact with and extract the content from any page using plain English instructions instead of brittle CSS selectors. And together, they'll handle the part of job hunting that's genuinely time-consuming, researching who you're actually applying to. And honestly, that's just scratching the surface of what Browserbase can do. On the paid plan, you get something called a stealth mode that bypasses bot detection on sites like LinkedIn. You also get parallel browsing sessions for running multiple agents at once, and session persistence that keeps your login state across runs. That opens up the possibilities, which allows you to add additional features to this application, such as the ability to auto-apply for jobs by automating form submissions. Again, the free plan is more than enough to follow along with this build, but if you want to take it a step further later on, you can give it a shot. So, to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing, click the Browserbase link down in the description, and then create your free account. Then, when you're in, you'll be able to see something that looks like this. So you can head over to your project dashboard under Overview, or you can immediately head over to Settings and grab your project ID and API key. Head back within your .env.local, create a new Browserbase API key and Browserbase project ID. I believe that's the first one we copied. And the second one is going to be the API key, starting with letters BB, as in Browserbase. So once you have the keys, we can restore the session by heading over to our agent. Again, feel free to use whichever one you like. Start a new session on it to clear the context, but still make it remember what it saved before by running remember restore. And it knows that the next feature is feature 13. So if you head back over to our context under build plan and you check out 13, you'll be able to see that this one is a bit longer. Here, the agent researches the company using their public website and builds a structured research report using a single browser-based session. 3 data sources fused together: the company website content, the job description from DB, and the user profile from DB. Here, we do the logic, and then what I actually took some more time on is telling Stagehand what it needs to do. It needs to capture what the company actually does and any concrete signals like funding, customers, scale, mission, recent launches, and then find the internal links most worth visiting to research them as an employer. What does the company do? What do they build or sell, and who is it for? Funding, notable customers. I mean, just imagine if you did all this research and you came to the meeting prepared. Then it'll extract the sub-pages that helps a candidate understand the company before applying. Finally, we give it a prompt as a sharp career strategist to prepare a candidate for a specific role. We will give the research, the job posting, and the profile, and then it'll tell the user everything it needs to maximize their chances. And this is actually the most complex feature in the entire build, where we have real browser sessions through Browserbase, company page navigation, GPT-4o synthesis, and database writes through InsForge. So the goal is to plan before we touch anything. So switch over to the plan mode. Once again, you can see we were using plan mode on Claude Code, but on Codex it's just in a different spot, but you can still turn it on. And you can tell it to check the browser as well as the fetch skills and use the library docs context and then architect the feature 13. Let's give it a shot and see what it does. Once it comes back with a plan, we'll be able to implement it. It already made a useful discovery by reading the library docs, as it has a newer stagehand initialization shape rather than the older architecture snippet. For feature 13, the plan should follow the model structure. It's going to check the actual code. Currently, everything is empty. Then it's going to look into the Next.js docs, as well as stagehand and Browserbase. Then it's going to check the InsForge skill to confirm the SDK pattern. It's actually doing a ton of work behind the scenes on making all of this happen. And this is the difference between vibe coding and agentic development. So if what you're seeing right here is impressive, definitely check out the agentic development waitlist, as the full course is coming soon. But yeah, very quickly, it went through it and it asked us a couple of questions to make sure that it planned it properly. It's asking whether the company research means a one-time dossier generated for one saved job stored on jobs.company research, not a reusable company profile. Yep, that works. And dossier means the updated 9-field JSON shape from context build plan with overview, tech stack, culture. Yep, that's exactly what it means. The browser research means Browserbase plus stagehand visiting the company's own public website profile. Fallback synthesis to 4.0 and research company buttons. That's the interaction on the client side. Yep, that's exactly what all of these mean. So we can just say, go ahead and proceed. Then it came back with the follow-up. Should feature 13 resolve the company homepage before opening stagehand? And in this case, I'll go with the Browserbase Fetch API, as it includes the redirects, which will allow us to handle tougher sites than the regular Fetch API. And then the second question is, what should happen when a job already has a company research saved? In this case, we can go with the recommended approach, which is to just render it, show the saved one, and hide the generate action to avoid duplicate paid runs. Perfect. With this in mind, it should be able to build it out. And the plan is officially here. Build feature 13 as a user-triggered research flow on the job details page. A client-side research company action calls the post API agent research, which authenticates the user, loads the user scope job and profile from InsForge, resolves the likely company homepage with Browserbase Fetch API, visits the company's site with one Browserbase or stagehand session, and then synthesizes a candidate-specific dossier with GPT-4o, saves it to jobs.company research, tracks the company's research, and then refreshes the job details page. This is amazing, and you can go over all of the details on how it's going to do it. Now, in this case, it looks like I'm out of Codex messages, so that's why it's super useful to have two subscriptions active, like one from Claude and Codex, and then using this workflow, you can always switch between the two. That's another pro tip, because two subscriptions of $20 are still cheaper than a single Mac subscription that's about $100. So let's see if we can actually proceed with implementing this plan. If not, we'll just copy this MDX and paste it over into another coding agent. It looks like it doesn't want us to do that, so it'll listen to us and try to implement the plan. Let's give it some time. And in about 7 minutes, it's done. Implemented feature 13 end to end. Build a company research agent flow across agent research, route files, company research, and research company button, which now resolves the URLs via Browserbase Fetch, runs stagehand extraction, synthesizes this 9-field GPT dossier, saves it, logs progress, and refreshes the details. So what do you say that we give it a shot? Back on localhost 3000, I'll go ahead and choose a backend developer job that is maybe not the best fit, but that I really much like this front-end developer with Cloudflare with a huge salary. Let's go with Aptino. The role requires JavaScript, which the candidate also has specific Cloudflare services. So here we have some job description, but below we can do full company research. But I don't see a research company button. Even though it says that it implemented it, research company button. Let's see, where does this button actually appear? Research company button. It looks like it appears right here. If there's no research, it should appear under the company research card. So maybe it thinks that this company was already researched. Let me see. If I manually remove this check right here, the button is here. So for some reason, it thinks that the company has been researched beforehand. Let's go ahead and run a review and tell it that the research company button is not visible. But unfortunately for now, we are really out of credits. So I'll copy this message, and this is going to be a real proof that this workflow is fully agent agnostic, even within working on specific features. And I'll tell it that the research company button is not visible, and I'll tell it to review it. Even though Claude wasn't the one who worked on this feature, it's actually checking out its competitors' Codex's code. It immediately was able to find a button visibility bug where the button visibility, specifically has research, is broken. So the fix is pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and tell it to apply the fix. And there we go. In about a second, the research company button is now rendered inside the empty state panel directly below the candidate-specific briefing. So if we come back, there's a big research company button. So let's give it a shot. It says researching, but since this is the biggest feature in the entire application, I assume that it's not going to work on the first try. It says fail to load job. And if we open up the terminal, we get a bit more info. So I'll copy it and tell it to review it. Specifically, when I click research company, this is what I get. And we can also provide this failed to load job message. The more context you provided, the better. Thankfully, the error is super clear. The company research column doesn't exist in the database. So it's going to check the migration files to understand what actually happened. That column was never added to the migration file. So it'll likely ask us to just run it via the InsForge CLI, which thankfully makes it super simple. And the way that InsForge interacts with agents is just so seamless and makes it the best way to develop a backend for any kind of application that I'm building with AI. So let's give it a moment. There we go. The migration applied successfully. The column now exists. So the research company button should now work end to end. Well, let's see whether that's really the case. I'll once again click research company. It'll load and say researching. And since this is a long process, another update that we can do is make some kind of a loading card with a multi-step process to give the user a bit of an idea of what is currently happening. Actually, that's a feature that's not a part of the initial build plan, but a perfect one for you to test how this workflow works when you want to add some new features. So very soon we'll be done with the build, just a few more features to go. Go ahead and implement that full modal multi-step loading system. It'll be a nice quality of life change for the users so that they don't have to stare at the screen and think whether something went wrong. But with that in mind, in about 20 seconds or so, we got a full company research. It includes the tech stack that the company works with, the culture, certified women's business enterprise. Okay, that's good. So if you're a woman, you might have an edge here. Your edge specifically is extensive experience in software engineering, particularly JavaScript, which aligns well with the core requirements of the role, the history of optimizing performance and implementing prediction algorithms at Apple demonstrates your capability to handle CDN optimization, gaps to address, while you lack direct experience with Cloudflare, emphasize your quick learning ability and past experience with similar technologies, and leverage your JavaScript expertise to bridge the gap in TypeScript. Smart questions. How does Aptino's integrate Cloudflare edge computing capabilities? And then it gives you some smart questions that you can ask, as well as some points for your interview preparation. And then it gives you some info on why this role is a good fit for you. So now you can very easily click this button and apply through the direct site. If you experienced any issues on implementing this feature, just use the recover functionality and tell it what went wrong. Don't forget to update the progress tracker if it hasn't been updated yet, to tell it that this feature was completed. This means that the agent just researched a company for you through a real browser, getting real data, and creating a real research report. And now to be implemented, what I believe is one of the most important functionalities of the app, we want to make sure that our users actually use it. So it's time to head back over to your PostHog dashboard. Under Browse Activity, you'll be able to see a lot of different events that were fired, such as Web Vitals, Company Researched, Page Views, Page Leaves, Research Company, and so on. If you click on this Company Researched, you'll also be able to get more data on exactly what company that was. So if you open up PostHog AI from the right side, instead of getting lost in all of these events, you can simply ask it a question, like, which companies have been researched so far? And it'll look for the company-related data in the project. It figured out that we're looking for a company researched event, so it's going to pull all the properties and sample values to find which companies have been researched. For now, there's only one value. It switched the agent to the SQL mode to extract it from our database, and it gave us back the table. Aptino was the only company that was researched. Of course, right now, we're the only user that has been using the app, and this is the only company that we researched. But with time, I'm sure that you can see how useful this is going to become. So this is just the start of what PostHog can do. In production, you'd use this to understand how users are actually behaving, which jobs do they research, where they drop off, and which match scores lead to applications. There's also other things like feature flags, web analytics, session replays, where you can see exactly how users are using your app, which is great if just looking at the data is unclear. So here you can filter by specific events, for example, Web Vitals, clicking different buttons, or you can also use AI to summarize what happened in this session. So it's actually going to render the video, upload it for analysis, analyze the segments, and tell you what the user is doing on the page. And while it's doing that, I'm just also noticing this notification here saying that PostHog is now available in Slack. And this is what I've been waiting for a long time. The ability to ask PostHog questions about your product data, debug issues, and generate PRs directly within Slack is something that my team will find super useful. So let's click on this. And you know what? Since this is the first time that I'm seeing this, let me actually go ahead and hook it up to our real company Slack channel, because I'm certain that this is something that both our engineers, designers, and marketers are going to abuse. So let's click Connect Slack. Right here, I'll select my workspace and give it permissions. And is that it? I just opened up the JS Mastery official Slack on marketing. Sondos here is asking some questions about pulling some specific data. And this is no joke, this happened yesterday. Frank said that we should keep everything up to date. And now I'm just testing PostHog here. It tells me that it can answer any data questions or help with code. What should it dig into? Well, let me ask it right here. Hey, PostHog, can you tell me how many users we have on jsmastery.com? Let's see if it can answer that. Okay, I guess this means that it's starting to work on it. Immediately, I get a response saying working on a task, stage in progress, and in about a minute, it came back with a response. It's looking at our jsmastery.pro project, which now that I'm looking at, we should have changed the name to jsmastery.com because that's the real domain, which we finally have. But yeah, it's taking a look at the number of users based on the page view events that exist on the page. And it looks like there were almost 1 million of you visiting jsmastery.com recently. This goes back to late February 2025, and I'm super grateful for so many of you visiting the site. Now, of course, it can further break that down by a monthly trend, by country, or just active users over the last 30 days. But let me instead ask it another question. Let's ask it, which is the best course on jsmastery.pro? Obviously, best is subjective, but I want to see how it'll approach it. We can maybe tell it, just give me the ranking 1, 2, 3 without listing the specific sale numbers, but you can do it by page visits instead. And let's not forget to tag the hog at the start. Funny enough, this time it actually put the eyes emoji instead of the seed. So I'm guessing that it is working on it. While it is working on it, we can head back to session replays where it successfully analyzed the video session that we had. And I'm not sure if you heard that. I just got a Slack notification and it said, I'll rank the courses by page visits. Based on the total page visits across jsmastery.com, here's the top 3. Ultimate Next.js 15 course, then the GSEP Animations course, and then the Ultimate Next.js course. I'm guessing this is the older version when we had versions 13 and 14, which we later updated to 15 and then later on 16. And then the GSEP course is following along nicely. And of course, the next goal is to completely change this list to make the agentic course the number 1, and then the backend course that we're working on follow closely on the second spot. But yeah, this is super useful. I think you can already see how if you're working within a team or if you just use a Slack for yourself or your partners, it's super useful to be able to speak with it, and it's going to come back with useful data directly from your app. So finally, let's take a look at what it researched. The user successfully browsed job listings, generated company research for a specific role despite initial errors, reviewed the research, and then proceeded to apply. This is super useful data. So it was able to figure out what we were clicking and that the user actually proceeded to apply after getting the company research. And then also how long they were staying at each part of the journey and how many issues they experienced. This info is incredibly valuable, And as a developer working on your product, especially if you're doing it solo or as a part of a small team where you can have a full marketing department, the amount of decisions that you can make based on the data that PostHog gives you is just astounding. So yeah, what do you say that we go ahead and build out a few more features and then we come back to PostHog one last time once the full features have been implemented? Oh, and I just finished recording the last lesson, and a couple of minutes ago, Sondos, our marketing person, just replied, "Crazy amazing how we can just do that easily now," and then proceeded to tag PostHog and asked how many signups JS Mastery Com and Pro has. So the fact that she was able to figure out that the only thing she needs to do is just tag this Slack app and ask it a question is great. It then proceeded to find the sign-up events, measured all of them together, and told her that JSM has about 160K total signups. I think this is the best and most honest showcase of how I'm personally using PostHog for jsmastery.com. But yeah, with that in mind, let's proceed with the build. We're getting very close to finalizing the application. The landing page is here, profile page is done, finding jobs page is done as well. So what's remaining is the dashboard. That's because finding jobs doesn't take just an hour, you're done, and you'll be out of the app. No, you'll likely apply to a couple of different companies, compare the salaries and the match scores, track when interviews are happening, and so on. So we can do all of that within the dashboard. Thankfully, within the designs, we have a very simple dashboard design: total jobs found, average match rate, companies researched, jobs this week, as well as the recent activity and a couple of different graphs. So opening up one of our chats, I'll switch back to Claude Code, open up a new chat and say, remember, restore to restore the latest session. And then we can tell it to build feature 14 exactly as shown in the context designs dashboard.png image. In this case, since this is just the UI, we don't have to run the architect feature. We can just build the UI. So let's tell it to build it and let's see what it comes back with. To do it, it'll first install recharts, which it'll use to create some charts, and then create separate components for the stats bar, recent activity, analytics charts, and finally wire it all up within the same page. So let's see how well it does it, and most importantly, how well will it follow the rest of the design language. And would you take a look at this? I mean, before, this would be a video on its own. Just creating this UI would take a couple of hours to teach it properly with charts and displaying it and hovering over the charts, this recent activity section, the cards with the badges and the numbers right here. I mean, this is just out of this world. But in the next lesson, let's see if we can actually make this data dynamic, coming from the InsForge backend and the database. In the previous lesson, we just created these mock components. And since this one contained a lot of components, I can see that it is still adding them as parts of the UI registry. So in the future, it immediately knows how these kind of dashboard cards and charts look like. But now it's time to wire them up to real data. The goal here is to wire up the 4 stat cards to real InsForge database for current user. This one doesn't actually require the architect mode, so I think it's even safe to do it in the previous session right here, where we did the UI. I'll simply tell it, implement feature 15. It'll figure out that it has to wire up the 4 stats card. Yep, there we go, to real database. So it'll query InsForge directly and update them. Let's give it a second to do that. And in about half a minute, it is done and it's already updating the progress tracker. So if we come back, total jobs found is now set to 20. Average match rate is 43. We definitely gotta bump those numbers up. Companies research, this is done using Browserbase, is set to 1. And then jobs this week is set to 20. What do you say that we implement the recent activity next, so we can see what the user is doing? Since this is just 2 DB queries through InsForge, and thankfully our agent knows everything that is happening with InsForge and an entire backend and database systems because it's built from the ground up to work with it, we can simply tell it to implement feature 16 and it'll know what it needs to do. The goal here is to run agent runs plus jobs with company research, merge them, and then say what happened, and then give it some kind of time frame, like 10 minutes ago, an hour ago, or yesterday. It figured out that we already have a format date. It's going to update the dashboard page to fetch those agent runs plus research jobs and build the activity list. Of course, we have some errors while it actually fetches it. And believe it or not, and I was doing this real time as I was speaking, it was able to build a real recent activity list where it found 10 jobs for backend developer job. Then we researched the Aptino company, and then it gave us 10 more jobs. We can verify that this data is real by heading over here, searching for some front-end jobs in New York, for example. And in this case, it looks like we found 10 jobs, one matching almost perfectly. So what I'll do is I will sort it by only high matches, looking for a front-end position. Oh no, it looks like all of our front-end positions are very low match score because the developer info that we filled in for this currently logged in developer matches that of a backend engineer. Let's say that we wanted to make a switch to a front-end engineering position. What would we have to learn about to make it in this company? I will click Research Company, commencing the Browserbase, which will start the Browserbase browser behind the scenes, doing all the research for us, opening many different pages. And if I'm not mistaken, there's even an option to show you what is happening. So you can look into that and implement that as an additional feature to the app so the user knows what's happening behind the scenes. But again, kind of the point of this is so that you can go away, do something else, and then very soon the agent comes back and gives you the full research. Like this. This is a venture-backed company focusing on building operational infrastructure for sensitive technologies. It seems that I lack direct experience with AI and modern front-end frameworks, but we should emphasize our strong problem-solving and adaptability. And of course, since we're not focused on React, we should practice our modern front-end frameworks and prepare examples that we worked on in the past. Perfect. So now if you head back, under our dashboard, you can see total jobs found 30, found 10 jobs for frontend, and researched Linero. So finally, if we go back, the last feature we need to implement for now is going to be feature 17, analytics, charts, and PostHog data. So now the goal is to wire 3 dashboard charts to real PostHog event data for the current user. Since this one is using PostHog, I actually want to plan it properly. So I will run remember, save right here, and then open up a new chat window and tell it to check the PostHog MCP and the library docs, and then architect the feature 17 in plan mode. And what's cool about Claude Code is that it does these things in parallel. So one agent is exploring the project context files for feature 17, while the other is exploring the existing codebase structure. Let's give it a second to come back with a plan, and then we'll see whether it's ready to be implemented. And very quickly, feature 17 is in. The dashboard already renders 3 chart components, but all 3 components use hard-coded mock data. Feature 17 replaces that mock data with real per-user event data fetched server-side from PostHog's query API using PostHog Node. PostHog MCP is installed but requires OAuth. We don't need it for implementation since PostHog Node SDK already has what we need, and the project's lib PostHog server is established. So we want to track 4 different events: job search started, job found, profile completed, company researched. So let's go ahead and accept it and see how it does. As soon as it implements it, this will have concluded our 5-phase build, where we started with foundations, moved over into the profile, then find jobs functionalities with Browserbase, job details and company research, and finally, the dashboard. So this is actually an interesting way of using PostHog because we're directly using the events that are typically used on the backend side where you track what your users are doing. But now we're going to use them to display them to our users as well, which is the first time that I'm using PostHog in that way. But I guess it makes sense with dashboard style applications. In any other kind of application, you would just go to your PostHog dashboard and take a look at all the events right here, and then create some kind of dashboards either manually or with PostHog AI. Or just ask it questions through Slack, like what I've just showed you. But there's also a possibility of using its data to display it within your own application. So let's see how it does. And the build comes back cleanly. Here's a summary of what was done. The 3 hard-coded mock data arrays were removed, and now it's pulling the data from PostHog to display real data. Interestingly, it decided not to use PostHog Query API because the PostHog Node v5 SDK doesn't expose the query, and the Query API requires a personal API key. So what we could have done is provided it the personal API key, and that would be good. But instead, it said, you can take a look at that data within your PostHog dashboard, or give me your personal key if you want to. But hey, I already have all of that data through the InsForge jobs table, and that is the authoritative source anyway, because PostHog events are derived from it. So querying the DB directly is more reliable and cheaper. So that's what it did. Take a look at this. Company research activity. Today is Friday. We get 2 new companies. Jobs found over time. Today we did 30, but you can of course research more over time. And now that I'm looking at this graph, maybe it'll be useful if we were hitting some limits. So if you wanted to implement billing to the users, you can let them know that maybe their limit is 30 per day. So they can come back tomorrow, or they can upgrade to another plan to use this SaaS. Because if you think about it, what you just developed is a job searching SaaS platform. So with a few more additions, I'm sure you'll be able to charge some money for it. And finally, there's the match score distribution. And it looks like we're a great fit for a lot of jobs, but for none, we're perfect. So maybe we still have to do some search and find the jobs that we are really the perfect match for, and definitely not apply for jobs like these. And yeah, talking about PostHog, let's see what it can actually tell us about how the app is being used. In this case, I prefer using the AI chat. So let's ask it, what's the average match score of jobs found this week? Again, this is a pretty vague search term, especially since we're not mentioning any specific event names. But it did found the job found event, and it's going to check some properties to see whether it includes the match score. There we go. Match score is a numeric property on job found, so that's all it needs to create an insight. And there we go. Here it is. The average match score is 40. So after a couple of days, if the user keeps improving their score, then it might be better tomorrow and the day after. Now, what you can do is open this up as a new insight and then even save it to your dashboard. So now when you go back to the insight list, you can see this is a new insight, which you can then add to one of your dashboards. But okay, what else can we ask it? Maybe like, what's the gap between finding a job and researching the company? A pretty vague question. And also very specific to the business logic of this specific app. Oh, and while it's running that, another interesting question might be, what percentage of found jobs get company research run on them? Okay, here it created a funnel of jobs found and then the companies researched. But I want to run this question because it'll tell us exactly how engaged our users are. Out of every job the agent finds, how many actually gets researched. This is the kind of behavioral insight that would normally take hours to set up in a traditional analytics tool. Here, we get it in one question. So it looks like it is about 6.7%. So in practice, only 1 out of 15 found jobs get company research run on it. That's a significant drop-off and likely a big opportunity. So we have to answer a couple of questions. Is the company research hard to find or access? Or is this event firing correctly? Or are there certain types of users more likely to research? And then you can dig further into some of these angles with PostHog. What would be cool is some kind of a coding agent that understands these PostHog insights as well as our code, that would then be able to develop the features to improve upon what this insight is saying is not ideal, maybe in the future. But yeah, this was PostHog in production. Not just tracking something that happened, but understanding what it means. Oh, and this Slack thing, which looks like Sondas is having a field trip with, asking it even more questions. And it's giving back very useful insights. So yeah, that's JobPilot, a full stack AI agent that finds jobs, scores them based on your resume or profile data, and gives your users a genuine edge before they click apply. It's built in a couple of days, not months, by directing an AI agent instead of fighting one. And what helped significantly is the fact that we used InsForge, because it's built from the ground up to communicate with the agent and allow it to build a full backend system, including auth, databases, storage, functions, and more directly from within your agent chat. So it was the key part of our entire agentic workflow in this video. And if you want to go deeper on all of this, there's an agentic development course coming soon. I'll leave the waitlist link down in the description. It'll cover everything from the ground up: how to research and plan a project with AI before you write a single line of code, how to build context files for any project, how to create your own custom skills, like the ones we had here, how to use AI in a way that actually holds together across features and across entire production databases, not just for one impressive demo. Once again, the waitlist is now open, and you can join it by clicking the link in the description. If this video helped, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with other developers who are still fighting their AI agent instead of directing it. Or maybe don't. Maybe keep it just for yourself. Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.